This episode of How To Wrestling was brought to you by our lovely backers over at patreon.com/How To Wrestling, where, hey, if you like this show and you like it being ad-free, you can head on over there, support the show, and get access to a whole bevy of audio goodies for your ears. I'm talking about pay-per-view reviews from WWE and AEW going all the way back to 2016. As well as that, you've got our ongoing pay-per-view classic series, where we review classic wrestling pay-per-views from all various areas of the WWE and WWF, WCW, even the NWO, TNA, New Japan Pro Wrestling, the AWA, and so much more. Our ongoing Totally Divas series, where we're reviewing all of Total Divas, and you get at least 2 new pieces of content each and every month. You want to hear our thoughts on the latest goings in the world of wrestling and support this show? Head on over now, patreon.com/How To Wrestling. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get immediate access to that entire 10-year back catalogue, and you'll get those extra goodies each and every month with no commitment to stay on, and you can drop out whenever you like. But for now, it's time to delve into the dark, weird, and strange world of one of wrestling's most unique characters, the ever-elusive and ever-endearing. It's time for How To Bray Wyatt. Greetings, friend, and welcome to another episode of How To Wrestling, the world's first podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows, maybe even how to enjoy wrestling. And today we're talking about one of the most creative, one of the most twisted, dark, unique, beloved characters in the history of wrestling. Today is all about Bray Wyatt. Hello, once again, it's me, your old pal, Captain Kevin, joined as I'm always by my co-host and better half, Joe Graham. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm good. This is an exciting episode in many ways. It'll be a challenging episode in some senses because we're talking about someone who's obviously not just been like kind of, I think, fundamental to our collective fandom, you and I together.
Yeah.
A character who kind of grew on the mainstream alongside when our podcast first started all those years ago. But also another character in wrestling, another person in wrestling, I should say, who passed well before their time. And probably one of those people who, because of the impact of their character and the strength of their presence in their history in wrestling, particularly in modern wrestling, it feels like it's one of those passings that's still not fully clicked, hit, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I mean, Bray Wyatt is one of the wrestlers that I actually would attribute to you getting interested in wrestling in the first place.
Oh yeah, he was, I think, the very, very first match you ever showed me from, like, current day wrestling. Because, like, when I met you and you told me you watched wrestling, you were very, I was going to say shady, but yeah, you were quite
sheepish
on
is brand
word.
for the episode, yes.
So I had to go off and do my own research, and, well, I mean, I like to think we've maybe changed a bit of what it's like now as a new fan to, like, try and learn about wrestling. But when I tried to learn about wrestling, I literally Googled, like, on YouTube or whatever, I was searching for, like, wrestling. And, like, what came up was, like, Mick Foley matches, The Rock, stuff like that. It was, like, classic Attitude Era things.
Yes.
And it was always, like, the most famous names. And when I realised then that for a lot of wrestling fans, it's not about watching necessarily classic stuff, you know, you watch classic stuff too, but it's also about there's a modern day product. You can watch it week to week like a soap opera. And so when I tried to get into that, it was just impossible. I just couldn't, there was nothing available online to help me watch any of it. So then when I came to you, I was like, I'd really like to watch some current day wrestling. I don't think you were watching much of it at the time either.
I know I was watching the pay-per-views and whatnot.
That's it.
In the snooker bar in Lincoln with the boys.
Yeah.
But, you know, part of being a wrestling fan from around the time we started this podcast was, you know, it felt like everyone hated, you know, those who were like the super hardcore fans who had an appreciation for the past usually lamented the current state of wrestling, even though at that time it was, in some ways, becoming quite an exciting product.
Yeah, I think it was, at the time, quite hit and miss. There was a lot of great stuff, and then there was a lot of really frustrating stuff. So I know you were really careful, based on what I had enjoyed on YouTube, you know, like with the Mick Foley stuff. You were like, okay, so if you like that and you like this, maybe you'll enjoy these guys. And you knew, because I was on Tumblr, that I liked The Shield. I didn't know anything about them, but I liked how they looked.
They were some handsome young men.
Yeah. And so you were like, well, you liked Mick Foley and you liked The Shield. You might really like this feud they're currently doing with the Wyatt family. And that was the first ever match you showed me, was the Wyatt family versus The Shield. And I think we're going to do it for this episode.
Yes, it's a repeat viewing for this, full circle. But I do remember at the time thinking that, the character is obviously what I think always draws people into wrestling, and people are drawn to wrestling because of the characters. Obviously, you can watch amazing athletic moves and flip-de-doos and high spots and all, or top spots in your case, and that can definitely draw you in. But I think what keeps you in wrestling and what makes you a fan and makes you committed, you call it like a soap opera. I mean, you could watch a million clips of someone slapping someone or throwing a drink on them from a soap opera.
Yeah.
But once you get endeared to a character, and I thought that, well, this character, Bray Wyatt, was one of the things in wrestling that I have been really excited about. Excited in the manner that one could be in the early 2010s, where every moment of excitement was tempered with, a cynicism.
Yeah.
Because I was a very cynical fan at the time. They were constantly teasing you with the past, but also at the same time trying to rewrite what that past was. It's part of the reason why I started the Edge Era podcast. And the stuff that was new and exciting always felt, in many respects, that they were gun-shy to be like, hey, this is the new thing, it's what we love, we're confident about it. And that's, the Shield and the Wyatts were two of the very rare examples of them being like, here is something new. It's not just something from the past rehashed.
Yeah.
And it might be able to draw in people. And I think I was so blown away by how quickly you were drawn in by that combination of characters.
Well, I love The Shield because they were hot, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they're great wrestlers. But what I loved about the Wyatt family, and Bray Wyatt in particular, and this is why I mentioned Mick Foley, is because I think people would assume, I was watching clips from the Attitude Era, I was watching Mick Foley, and think I'm watching, the spots he did.
Yeah, Hell in a Cell or I Quit or
that's
whatnot.
That's not at all what I was watching. That's not what got me interested in wanting to watch more of wrestling. It was the character stuff.
Yeah.
It was the Rock and Sock connection, or the really meaningful Mankind promos he was cutting. It was the fact that it was quite poetic and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, wrestling can kind of be art. And so then for the Bray Wyatt stuff you showed me, the reason I enjoyed it so much, okay, I enjoyed the in-ring stuff, but I didn't really know what I was looking at.
Yeah.
But his promos, his character work,
the presentation of it all,
it.
The entrance.
It was immediately a story that is presented to someone like me who know nothing. I didn't know anything about any of these guys. I knew nothing about the industry. And yet it drew out rules and guidelines for which I could understand a lot of the other stuff that was going on. It was just very accessible.
One of the earliest memories I have is coming to your house for a date, and this would have been, I'd say, within the first dozen dates, with the flowers in my hands. That's right, I'm a gentleman. But you were listening to Bray Wyatt's entrance music when I came into the house, and I think that was one of the first cases where it's not just the parameters of, okay, it's for wrestling, this is interesting, or I'm enjoying this because it's a wrestling thing and my new boyfriend likes it. It was no. Your fandom has begun in earnest on your own account.
Yeah.
And that's when I felt okay, now I can start maybe wanting to show you things in wrestling, and because I feel like you can never force that first connection. And he was one of the first ones that you made, I think, for a lot of fans.
Yeah. And I think it was easy for me as a fan at the time for me to go, oh, well, all wrestling must be like this then. And then getting a bit disillusioned at points, realizing, oh no, there was something very special about him and their faith in his creative work.
Yeah, or at times lack of. And I think, today's episode will be as much an examination of Bray Wyatt, the character, and Wyndham Rotunda, the person, but as much as the confines, the parameters of creativity in wrestling, and how sometimes they can be at loggerheads with one another. And I think that to be a Bray Wyatt fan, as we were for the last dozen years or so, there is a frustration that's kind of almost baked in with that. I think that there were many highs for him, but there were just as many, if not more, at times it felt like crushing blows. He was one of those characters who it was hard to be a fan of at times, and not because he was off doing problematic shit like a lot of wrestlers that you might become a fan of early doors were. It's because you could see his passion, and you could see then sometimes the disappointment in such an ambitious character meeting the reality of maybe a less ambitious creative process in WWE at the time.
That was the hardest thing for me as a fan, was just like seeing someone like him who did everything right. Like, he put everything into all of his ideas, and he had so many ideas, and he always gave them 110%, and they were successful and over with the crowd. And I'm not saying everyone loved the characters in the way that I loved them, but they always got a really hot reaction, which is, I think, the most important thing in wrestling. So that's why it was so frustrating then when WWE had this like foot on the acceleration. Oh no, I'm taking it off now. No, we're doing it again. No, we're not doing it now. It's like, he's proven to you again and again that you should have faith in him. Why don't you have that faith in him?
His story is a particularly interesting one because he had an introduction to the audience that was on the grander end of underwhelming, let's just say. But for me, like, as a fan, my earliest memories of him was like sheer excitement, because I could draw the clock back to like 2006 when I first got broadband, hooked up LimeWire, and I just started downloading any random wrestling video that I could possibly get my hands on. And I just, because I had a thirst for old stuff, and I had, probably spent all the money I had on DVDs and had gotten all the things that I could get my hands on. I wanted more and more and more. And I stumbled upon like random In Your House or copies of WWE Superstars from the mid-90s, and seeing a character called Waylon Mercy, who, it's very easy to say like, oh yeah, I saw him back then now, but like, legitimately seeing this character who I went on to find only had probably a dozen or so matches in the WWE.
That would be so cursed, I think. It's like the equivalent of finding ECW VHS tapes is like downloading a LimeWire video that has Waylon Mercy. Like, it feels like you've gotten the wrong thing. You've got like a snuff movie.
It's going to come through the screen. Like,
you've got cursed now.
I was very much brought up on the diet, the WWE late 90s kid diet of everything that came before 1998 sucked. WCW sucked. Can you believe we used to put Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior out here? PU, look at this stupid In Your House set. That's so cringe and lame. So watching some of that bit of tongue-in-cheek, being like, okay, here comes the wrestling plumber and here comes the wrestling hockey player, and then all of a sudden, here comes the serial killer who's like, I don't like worms touching me, and when I come into the World Wrestling Federation and them wrestlers start fixing to touch me, I'm gonna smack them like a worm. And like, I remember just like, I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about it now. Like, just thinking like, this is wrong. Like, he doesn't belong here. Why is this? And I saw that before I saw Cape Fear. There's obviously a strong inspiration for that. But in the same manner, I felt that Bray Wyatt was a character when he first got introduced. And I would have been watching NXT from as soon as, like, I watched NXT when it was a reality show. When NXT became a developmental program, I was glued to it straight away because I wanted to see what was coming up next. And once there was rumblings that there was this Bray Wyatt character coming, straight away I was like, oh my god, this guy that I was obsessed with, who didn't really fit into wrestling, is coming back with this guy who I know has got pedigree. It was a level of excitement I think that I hadn't had for like 5 years at that point as a wrestling fan. And it was a level of excitement that I think had a lot of ups and downs, because his story is one that's been tempered, I think, over the years with a lot of issues that were sometimes well out of his own control and grasp.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, like, as a kid, the thing that always drew me in was crazy, over-the-top, dark, fantasy-type characters.
I'm always surprised there's not more of that in wrestling, because I know wrestlers, I feel, as a whole, maybe it's more modern, but I feel they do as a whole skew towards, like, they love horror movies and alternative, like, black metal and stuff, like, counterculture. I think wrestling is inherently very counterculture.
Yeah, I think the majority of the fan base would fit in that category. So I think it's funny, though, because, like, if you hear people talk about the Attitude Era, it's all like, oh yeah, it was, more realistic, gritty and stuff like that.
So
like,
funny.
My favorite character is this weird guy in a leather mask who lives in a boiler room, and I'm hooked to the fact that there is a corporate merger happening between a cult and an evil corporation. Yes. This guy just fed blood to a pig farmer, and now we can see the future. And yeah, it was really gritty and reality based, and just our real life personalities with the volume turned way up and all that. So I think he was an exciting character from the word dot, just because he was harkening back to different elements of like wrestling's past. Because we've watched some stuff from the New Generation, and I
love the New Generation.
But a lot of that kind of fantastical, wacky, that kind of that is a big part of wrestling. I think there are a lot of fans who, as soon as they see that or even get a whiff of that, no, No. Can't have that whatsoever.
I blame Triple H. Genuinely, I do. I blame him.
But I think he has an affinity for that to an extent.
I don't know.
You know?
We'll have to do the Triple H episode for me to find out.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of the man, Wyndham Rotunda, who grew up in Brooksville, Florida, who came from the most extreme wrestling pedigree you could imagine. Like, because people throw around, the Nepo baby, Cody Rhodes likes to own that as a term and whatnot. But like this guy, you want to talk about wrestling having more than one royal family? This is some wrestling pedigree right here. Family members who are famous out the goddamn wazoo. Were you shocked to hear some of the names that you knew a bit about this? Did you? Or
I knew about his dad, Mike Rotunda,
also known as
IRS,
also known as Michael Wall Street.
Oh right, yeah.
Who in WCW had a gimmick where Terry Runnels was able to put in all the data of his opponents into a laptop computer, and then he would figure out how to win the match because, baby, she got that laptop and it's got all the answers.
Great stuff.
I love the 90s.
Yeah. I was familiar with his uncles, but didn't realise that they were his uncles.
Oh, I see, right.
Because they showed up on the Four Horsemen episode.
Yes.
Barry and Kendall Windham. I believe I named Kendall Windham as my... one of my choice lineups for the best iteration of the Horsemen. If I could pick the best ones.
Yes, that's the one that Joe has as Hiro Matsuda as the JJ Dillon figure. I'm pretty sure Jeff Jarrett is in there as well.
Oh.
But we won't hold that against you, Joe.
I'm pretty sure Sid was in there.
Yep.
Can't remember the rest.
It was a cursed horseman.
Yeah, it was as cursed as possible. But yeah, so I'm familiar with Barry and Kendall Windham.
His grandfather as well, Blackjack Mulligan.
I wasn't familiar with him, and he looks like the coolest wrestler ever.
I think there's been at least a dozen wrestlers who have basically donned the mantle of Blackjack Blank to try and basically take that look of...
You can't beat Blackjack Mulligan, though.
Black hat, black mustache... Great bit of business
It's such a great look. It's such a great name. I love the word Mulligan.
Mulligan is a good wrestling name. Yeah, I think that works very well. So I think, like, to say that you've got a good backdrop of wrestling, of wrestling familiars there, because it tends to be in wrestling, with a few exceptions, obviously, Cody Rhodes, Charlotte Flair. But if your father is like... or, you're a family member who is one of the top stars of all time, that's almost like the poison chalice. But if you've got family members who are all considered to be, like, really good hands, long, steady careers... obviously Barry Windham was an NWA World's Champion. He was a very big star. He main evented with Flair all over the territories, etc. But I feel like you were set up for a bigger level of success because you're exposed to it.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't have the crushing shadow of a father or a close family member who is always going to outshine your accomplishments at every step.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that it's safe to say it's another Dusty Rhodes innovation because he's the one who put Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham together as tag team partners in Florida. So basically Bray Wyatt's success and his birth all down to the American dream.
Yes. So Barry and Kendall have a sister, and she was advised by their parents, okay, your brothers, they're allowed to be wrestlers, but you better stay away from all those other wrestlers, okay? Because they're all bad boys.
Unlike your brother.
Yeah, they're good boys, but the other wrestlers are all bad boys. So you don't go near them, okay? You stay safe.
You stay away from that Tully Blanchard, you hear?
Yeah. And she's like, yes, Mum and Dad. And then 6 months later, she married Mike Rotunda.
6 months!
Eee.
Mamma mia!
Move fast.
That's impressive stuff. And before you know it, there's a baby boy on the way. You hear that Mike and Barry, they wrestled at the first WrestleMania, and it was right around that time where young Wyndham was in fact born.
Yes.
So hearing the birth over the phone, which is the most wrestler of the 1980s on the road 300 days a year thing you could imagine.
Now, I found the names incredibly confusing, and I imagine some listeners will too.
Wyndham Rotunda.
Yeah, so Bray Wyatt's real name is Wyndham Rotunda, but his mother's maiden name is Wyndham, and that's why he's called Wyndham, is because his first name is his mother's maiden name.
That is fairly confusing.
It's so confusing, because for ages I thought I'd written down the wrong names, and that I had wrongly called that, like, given them the wrong surname or something.
I mean, it's easy for you to say. You've got a forename for your surname,
Is that easy for me to say then?
Graham. You know?
Does that make it easier?
Well, it's
or
me.
harder?
We we could call our child Graham.
Graham. We should do that.
Graham Mann. Oh, I mean, Mann doesn't work as a first name, is all I'm saying. Like, I get a little bit jealous when people have got that. I will say, for the record, Wyndham is a fabulous name.
It's a great first name, surname, either way.
It's mysterious. I do like it. And not long after that, of course, we have his baby brother born, who is Taylor Rotunda, more so known as Bo Dallas in wrestling circles, who was another very, very early exposure for you.
And
probably
I think my first comedy wrestler I got into.
Yeah, it's wild to think that, because you saw he was kind of quite a subversive character. The original Bo Dallas character was meant to be like, I'm a good guy, so everyone should love and cheer me. Boo, we hate that. So I felt like that was quite like a rich dish for a new fan to get their chompers around. But I think the family resemblance, particularly in the eyes, I think when you see Wyndham, or should I say Bray, smile, he like transforms into his brother, it feels like. Hard to see the resemblance in IRS.
No, I know.
You know, other than that he's got kind of a stocky build or whatever. But yeah, I understand that. It feels like, but their sister as well, Mika, it feels like a lot of the resemblance comes from,
just that generation of kids. They just like all look like, related to each other, but just not the parents.
We need to have a look at the grandparents, like, you know.
Bring out Mulligan.
Mulligan again. As a boy, Bray was obsessed with Ghostbusters, Beetlejuice, a movie which he knew off by heart.
Yeah, you say as a kid as well, we have to specify, he was age 3 watching these things and being like quoting the whole thing, bless him, which I can kind of relate to because at age 3 I was obsessed with the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Predator, for the record.
And I got in so much trouble because I was allowed to invite friends round to my house for my birthday one year. I think it was my 5th birthday. And we watched Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is entirely inappropriate. And I paused the scene where you see like the dead body and they're all eating it. And I was like explaining to all my little friends, like, and this is how they did this scene, and it's fake, and they're all crying. I had to go home.
I don't know. I imagine 3-year-old Bray Wyatt, showed the scene where they all age exponentially and decay. Yeah, I got in trouble in preschool for slapping all the boys and girls and going, "You son of a bitch! What's the matter?" So I think that I would have been pals with Bray Wyatt as a boy from that Goosebumps collection alone.
Oh, man.
This was very, very, I don't know, in some respects obvious, but like when you have a character that has, I feel, obvious influences, you don't want to be kind of like, oh, he just did a lot of stuff from kind of, Goosebumps, whatever it was. But like, it made so much sense. It was like it was like a corner piece of a jigsaw being found,
It's not like anything he did was taken from a Goosebumps book. It's not, none of it was a copycat.
But it shows you the type of child that he was and what kind of a teen he would become and what kind of an adult he become.
I feel like you could write a Goosebumps book about any of the characters he's come up with.
Yes.
Like, in terms of the horror-themed ones, and it would fit perfectly in the series.
I think there is, a kind of, I don't know, like, I feel the 90s were a grand time for that kind of accessible, friendly, scary stuff that wasn't perhaps going to fuck you up from, age 3 onwards.
I mean, some kids were fucked up by Goosebumps.
I mean, I know my cousin was particularly scared about the thing that lived under the kitchen sink or whatever
me too.
it was.
That was a scary one.
Now, I only ever rented Goosebumps books from the library, so obviously I got some sort of a curation going on there. Maybe some of them were extremely messed up. A kid hanging out in the late Hogan era, back in the day where you could just, as a child, when your dad's a wrestler, you get to hang around and see the likes of Hogan, Bret Hart, Roddy Piper. Like, it was in many respects, I guess, the tail end of the golden years. But in terms of the exposure as a child, I think that would just, like, you'd be mesmerized by that.
Oh, yeah. I can't even imagine seeing a bodybuilder as a child, like, in the flesh.
But I remember, like, my dad would go to conferences as a child and be like, wow, they all have name tags.
Look at this big room.
Look at these pens. Oh, my God.
Wait, is this free?
Sorry, there's breakfast tomorrow?
My dad must be famous.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how I felt about my dad. Like, if he was surrounded by, like, the luminaries of the greatness of wrestling, the story about little 7-year-old Wyndham Rotunda seeing his dad take a trip to Pity City from the Nasty Boys is a very foundational part. Like, he has to be in this wrestling business because his dad is a heel. He's working against the Nasty Boys, and they put his head in, like, under their armpits, and he's like, "I'll save you, Dad."
He mentions that as being a really formative memory of him wanting to become a professional wrestler. The idea that his dad had to smell the Nasty Boys' stinky armpits and he wanted to like get in there and get involved. Like that's such a, again, like a very 90s kid. It's slime horror.
It's gross.
It's so gross.
Yeah, also I need to defend my dad.
Yeah.
I think that's like perhaps the last era where you could have a pure situation like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think like maybe Mick Foley's children were seeing him getting waffled in the head with a chair over and over and be like, I'm going to go save you. I'd be running for the hills in that case. But
hiding under a table.
if someone's sticking my dad inside of smelly Brian Knobs,
I'll get him.
I'll still take care of this, Dad. Don't worry. I'll go sort it out.
My armpits are way stinkier.
Bray, as a youngster, dominates in school sports, and it is interesting to see that even though you probably have the golden ticket from being from a big wrestling family, all the connections and all that, he has the double insurance of being a standout athlete at every step of his schooling.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning the reason why he got into sports so hard, because he was a chubby kid, and it's really sad to think about, but he kind of says in one of the documentaries we watched where he was like, look, if you are a fat kid in the era I grew up in school, you had to be able to defend yourself, basically.
Yeah.
So I enrolled in every contact sport I possibly could, like American football, I got into amateur wrestling, like every single thing. And it just so happened he was really fucking good at them as well.
Yeah, he is essentially from an early age pegged for professional football greatness. His dream was to ultimately sign with the Oakland Raiders, which is the team that Jim the Anvil Neidhart played for very briefly once upon a time. I think that's like kind of like where you go if you're like a heel football player, basically.
They should have like the Harlem Globetrotters, but like a heel football gang.
But the idea, I think, was that, he was almost put on this track quite quickly. I think if you excel and you're told at a young age, this is your future and all that, I think it's quite easy to like channel all the youthful energy, all the focus into achieving just that.
Well, yeah, because there's nothing quite like being really, really good at something from a really young age. It's incredibly rewarding. It's
a coin flip, though, because, you've probably heard at this point a million times from Dwayne Johnson telling the story of how that was his kind of his career goals, and then when that didn't work out for him, he had $7 in his pockets and had no choice but to become the biggest star in the world. But for most people, usually when you are pegged for greatness from a young age, it is a double-edged sword, and it is a lot of expectation and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think along the same time, when you are perhaps maybe going to the back of your head some of those wrestling aspirations, okay, maybe that's not for me, maybe this is the thing I meant to do instead, and it actually ends up being Taylor, Bo Dallas, who gets then paid. Well, he's not doing the college athlete thing. He's not gotten the free scholarship and the ride through university. So he's actually signed to WWE aged 18.
Yeah, that's wild.
That is fucking insane. I mean, I know that like Bryan Danielson got signed at a similar age to WWE, very, very young.
But the difference is he would have been doing indie stuff like the entire time.
I mean, he would have been, I guess, trained from a Shawn Michaels perspective and kind of put forth as a young prospect. But like Paige was signed at that age. Teddy Hart, who was the kind of the imploding youngest Hart, he was signed at an extremely young age. That is so crazy for me even now to think of. When I was age 18, like getting into university was like almost too much for me to handle.
Yeah.
The idea that you're like, hey, by the way, you're going to become a big WWE superstar and carry on the legacy of your father.
No fucking pressure.
God, I am, we watched there was a documentary that was released last year called Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal, and there's a lot of talk and a lot of interviews have been done since with Bo Dallas, who I have come to appreciate as someone who has carried the weight of several worlds on his shoulders, and never once it felt like it's been too much for him. I am in awe of the man's internal strength, let's just say. So Wyndham's football career starts kind of, stagnating a little bit. He is getting less and less time on the field. This is despite the fact that he's gone from Florida to California to Alabama. Like, he has traveled all over the country in pursuit of this dream, and he kind of realizes maybe time to get out while, I'm still kind of ahead of it.
Which is wild, because I was reading that he quit football, which obviously means he quit college.
Yes.
When he had like 27 hours left on his like credits or whatever. I don't know how they work out in America, but there's like a certain number of hours you have to put in. and he had like hardly any left, and he was like, "No, I'm leaving, and I'm gonna go to FCW."
The college athlete thing was interesting to you. Didn't really know much about it? Or?
Yeah, I find American college scholarship culture really weird and alien to me.
There's a lot of powerful forces at work. A lot of money.
Yeah.
Very, very little of it often ending up into the actual athletes' pockets. But yeah, it is a very strange system to get in. I would think in some respects, though, from all the traveling and having to be on the road and upheaving your entire life several times over, that in its own right is probably very good at grounding you and preparing you for the wrestling business. Yeah. So he ends up getting signed to FCW shortly thereafter.
So that's what I thought was so cute, right? Because the brothers, I feel, have this kind of like, they like to not copy each other, but they're both influenced by each other so much.
Yeah, because they talked about like how Wyndham, he loomed large in the other siblings' life. He was like he was the big brother. He was the kind of the beloved. They all looked up to him, etc.
He was Taylor's hero.
Yeah, he took the responsibility very seriously.
And obviously it was Wyndham who got into like the professional kind of, I say professional, but amateur professional football. I don't know what
collegiate sports.
Collegiate, football. And Taylor then did follow him, but he got injured, and so then he quit to become a wrestler. And then Wyndham, seeing, like, I think he went to go visit him one time, and he saw just like how much fun he was having and how good he was at it, and he was like, I'm going to join you. I'm going to do it with you. We're going to do it together as brothers. It's like they've got such a special relationship where they're not threatened by each other's coming into each other's territory.
Yeah, a lot of brothers in wrestling where I wouldn't think.
Can you imagine?
I mean, I'm reading the Hart book the Bret Hart book again for the Attitude Era Podcast Patreon series right now, and generally speaking, siblings get very paranoid of one another in the wrestling business.
And instead, these two, they just like lift each other up like every step of the way.
It's one of the healthiest relationships, familial or otherwise, I've seen in wrestling because it feels the big drive of it is them wanting to have fun. Because, of course, WWE, as they have to with everything that they present, it's like, they were signed to the prestigious Florida Championship Wrestling under the tutelage of the great Dusty Rhodes. And, look, we've seen the footage, we've seen the clips. They're wrestling in, like, buildings that are smaller than the local indie that Joe and I will go to that has, like, maybe 30 or 40 people in the crowd type of a thing.
I find these documentaries struggle with FCW to really give the context of what it is.
It's greasy. Like it's way more humble than they wanted to make out to be.
But then also sometimes in these things they'll make out as though it's like it's no opportunity at all, and they'll be like, oh well, it's just some dirty room. It's like, well, Dusty Rhodes is there.
He's in the dirty room.
It's a massive opportunity in a dirty room, and that is professional wrestling.
Yeah, it is one of those things I think that as more and more, the WWE has just like, it's fine-tuned so much its developmental system to gloss everything up to a shine, where, now even the people who aren't yet signed all have their special asterisk, their next in line athletes, WWE ID athlete, all that stuff where it's they just want you at every step of the way, have it radiate prestige. And for me, like, considering the two of them are the sons of, Hall of Fame wrestlers who not just like were successful in wrestling, but they were successful in the office side of wrestling, because Mike Rotunda was one of the longtime producers and road agents for the WWF, as with Barry Windham had done a lot of that stuff as well. So obviously they have an inroad in more than one way. I would think you'd want to emphasize the fact that, hey, in FCW, I've heard on Paige just talked about it on her podcast and stuff, how and then even Kenny Omega talked about it when he was in Deep South Wrestling, how they had to go out and stick up the posters, and they had to like flyer. They were responsible for setting up those 40 seats and sweeping up afterwards, putting up the ring.
My favourite story of people joining the FCW is the Bella Twins. Yeah. They're just them talking about like how they got signed to WWE, and they're like, oh, it's going to be so glamorous, the big time. It's like, oh, it's this horrible little room where we have to clean up everywhere.
I do think that there will be, give it a year or two, but there will be some case of some, well-meaning, excitable prospect who's been given some sort of a label by WWE of like the next in line greatness, even though you're just doing indies like everyone else, where that will I don't know, will come into collision with reality, I think. I think this little bit of humbleness is really important.
I think it's so important. I think it's genuinely, I think if you look at the state of current day wrestling and a lot of the newer wrestlers that come through, there's a lot of stuff they're not so good at, and it tends to be the fundamentals. And I think FCW was an extremely underrated and important part of early wrestling training because it humbles you.
Yeah.
And that's really important. You get a lot of people with big egos coming into the wrestling industry, and it's really important that that gets like squashed down at first.
Well, you can see from the struggles that people have after they, you know, the releases that come in WWE now in modern times where they haven't made it to the main roster. They've only been in NXT. And it's like they're on another planet when they come into reality with the real independent wrestling scene, you know?
I just think having the combination of it being really hard work ethic, nothing glamorous, you know, you're not going to be a household name or anything like that straight away. You got to learn the basics, but also having that chance to learn from, you know, they have a Dusty Rhodes there. They have like all these really talented producers, trainers,
John
agents.
Cena was even mentioned as someone who like
who'd pop in.
He'd pop in and like, you know, they would do strength training and all of that. And like noting like early on that Bray has this kind of magnetism to him. I think for me, like, I think back to our Elite episode, we watched like the Dory Funk training camp, and you could just see again in a tiny room with like a couple dozen people. It's like there's a star, lights up the room, and seeing him being like your typical holiday camp, hey everybody, like high-fiving, come on boys and girls, let's clap for the good guys, and seeing him effortlessly do that, you know, I think wrestlers who have maybe a more fanciful character or more kind of over-the-top presence might think stuff like that is a little bit beneath them, but I think it gives you good bones as a wrestler, and seeing him be that high-fiving, long-haired, rock and roll good guy with Bo it melted my heart to see those very humble beginnings.
It was so like classic wrestling. It felt very 90s, them doing I think it was Bo and Duke Rotundo was their tag team name.
And like it's just, it very much was of the time, you know, but I think it was nice to see that, you know, that all that footage still exists out there. You can see all that FCW stuff, you know.
They pulled it off, because I think while those types of characters are quite cringe, it's a skill to be able to do a completely generic babyface character and pull it off.
I think, you know, you present yourself then as like kind of a blank slate for the eyes of the main show, and WWE was doing NXT Season 2 around this time, and they needed a whole new crop of quote-unquote rookies. Now, do you remember anything about what the original NXT was like? And we talked about it million years ago on the Bryan Danielson episode, if you can recall.
Yes, it was a game show.
It's like,
which in my mind makes it seem like, I don't know,
fun,
catchphrase
cool.
or something. Yeah, and then buzzing in, and William Regal's like, the answer is this.
Well, I mean, there was a little bit of buzzing in and whatnot, but it was meant to be like kind of a hybrid reality show come contest, come wrestling event. There would be matches, but the idea was that you had rookies who were guys from FCW, and in one season they had an all-female season, and they would be paired with pros who are usually folks middle of the card, slightly upwards. You wouldn't have like kind of the main eventers or anything like that.
That's
necessarily.
How we got Ryback and William Regal.
Yeah, so we got Ryback and William Regal joined together. That's how we got Darren Young teamed up with CM Punk. That's how we got The Miz and Bryan Danielson.
Yeah, so funny.
Honestly, it is a really interesting show. It's something I'd love to go back and like maybe review with you.
An episode about NXT would be really good.
Yeah, because it is very, very different. But I remember like the first season of it, which the eventual winner was Wade Barrett, and that kind of morphed into then a Nexus storyline. It all kind of was wrapped up within a few months, and I remember thinking like, oh, that was really exciting and interesting and new. And then it's like, all right, we're going to do it again, and here's a whole new crop of guys. And the second crop of guys felt like, you know, not, even less prepared in some respects, because the first crop of guys had no idea what they were doing, but the second crop of guys were like, who have we got now? And Bray was one of those people who was chucked in. I don't think a whole deal of thought was given to it other than, well, he's a decent hand in the ring, he's got pedigree, so, you know, we can go with it. A lot of them were thrown to the wolves.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of names in there that, like, you know, dissolved upon impact with being on that TV show. But he was given a harder start than most, because considering that this guy has got hell of a look, hell of a work rate in wrestling. He could move very, very fast and had a lot of explosivity.
Charming, too.
Charming, kind eyes.
Vince McMahon backstage rubbing his hands. How do I ruin this?
The name Husky Harris is, attach the stone of shame and the stone of triumph all at once. Talk about an absolute insurmountable thing to overcome as a performer.
I hate it so much because I actually love the name Husky Harris. But obviously, it's a dig at his weight.
Yeah, that's all it's meant to be. Like,
and he could, he's a smart guy. He fucking could tell that it was a dig at his weight. I've not seen much of the character Husky Harris, but they showed like a clip on the documentary we watched, and it made him seem like he was trying to be this like weird creep.
So with Husky, the thing about it was that his pro was a young Cody Rhodes, who had broken out from being in Randy Orton's Legacy group and was now under the moniker of Dashing Cody Rhodes. And his whole gimmick was that how vain and beautiful he was. He would look at himself in the mirror and all that, and he would come out and cut promos about how prettier he was than everyone, and then make people in the front row wear paper bags because they were too ugly and they couldn't look at him. Great bit of business. But it genuinely felt like Husky Harris's whole role was to be there so that Cody, when he was doing those promos, would be like, you people are like Husky Harris here. And he would have to like look at his stomach and go, what?
Jesus Christ.
So that was kind of it, They tried to give him some other bits and bobs, like, they give him the moniker of he was the army tank with the Ferrari engine to put over his, that he was big but he could move in the ring. They give him a t-shirt that had a husky dog on it to be like, see,
so ugly.
Like the dog, not like this. I remember the first time I heard him speak, because I thought, like, Husky Harris, that's a stupid fucking name. Like, you might as well call him Fat Albert. Like, what a stupid fucking name to give this guy. And he did a promo. The first thing they do is, like, put you on the spot in NXT. They're always trying to catch you out. So they'd be like, blah, promo time, and give you a microphone. Like, all right, here you go, cut a promo. And cut a promo about, I don't know, the sky. And everyone would fuck it up. And it would make for great television and ruined careers. And they gave him a mic out of nowhere. I'm like, well, cut a promo now. And he's like, these boots here, man, see what I'm wearing? These Barry Windham's boots, man. Let me tell you now, these are the boots of a wrestler, a real wrestler. And I was like, oh my God, why'd you give him that name? He can talk. He's talking about, and I just seen the Four Horsemen DVD. I'm like, he's talking about Barry Windham. This is fucking great. Like, and he's like, wait, Barry Windham's his uncle? What? And I was immediately like thinking, I was more annoyed.
Yeah.
Because like, he's got something. And you've given him that goddamn name. And, as a heel rookie character, there was very little upside to him. And yeah, they used him in like random bits like, oh, they'll have him perv on some girls or whatever. It just... he seemed kind of miserable. Like, retrospectively, you can look back and go, oh, he seems miserable. Watching it week to week at the time, I was like... just kind of confused more than anything, I guess.
Yeah.
He was then brought in as part of like the Nexus angle that they were doing.
Of course, because everyone was.
There was the idea of just he was a body, someone that Randy Orton could kick in the head and stuff like that. But his early tenure was fairly dispiriting and probably the type of thing that reasonably would have ended most people's careers. Because like, what have you got for me? Husky Harris,
I really resent the name Husky Harris being used as an insult because in my mind, Husky Harris is the kind of like I can imagine his grandpa, Black Jack Mulligan, being called Husky Harris. Like I think of a grizzled cowboy.
But if the first thing you do with that character is be like, check out, he's fat.
He's fat and he's creepy. It's so shit. And
weight in wrestling is only a thing if you, the promoter, and the creative people decide to make it a thing. Because there are infinite numbers of heavyset wrestlers where it has never even randomly come into anyone's mind about their weight until you start making it about their weight. And I think that's the thing with wrestling. Like, wrestling fans, bless us, a lot of us, are cruel in our hearts without realizing it, because a lot of wrestling fans who are drawn in are people who have been bullied or people who have been ostracized a little bit, and if they give you a little bit of that rope to be like, hey, we can make fun of this guy, I think we all want to think better of ourselves and better of people at large, but I think there is a propensity for cruelty that, once they started calling Vader fat in WWF, that was it. Like, for me as a fan growing up, that's all I viewed him as, because that's what JR, the great announcer, said he was. So that's all he is.
It's such a shame.
You could tell in his eyes it was more than just, it was a crappy name and it sucked.
Yeah.
It felt like my momentum has been...
But that's it, because like I think the name is like the tip of the iceberg. That's the bit that we can see, right? As fans, it's like, well, that's a shit thing to do to someone who doesn't really, no one deserves that. But then it's like, he's such a, like, the performer, Wyndham, is such a charming guy.
He's so many different facets going for
Yeah,
him.
but he's like, he's so charismatic. Like, in character and out of character in real life, he's like really fucking charming. And so to give him, it's like, to me, it's like the whole character of Husky Harris I find is so insulting, because it's just like they drew something up randomly in a sketch pad and just plopped it on him.
Yeah.
And it's just like completely out of nowhere and no reason for it whatsoever. It's just cruel.
It was just, some creative roundtable where they were like throwing them 8x10s of them and like,
you do this.
Who can make the boss pop?
Yeah, exactly.
And that'll be what gets stuck with
We got one chuckle out of Vince. It was worth it, I guess.
It is one of those things that shows you the extremely disposable view of talent at the time. Because I think now they've almost gone the opposite direction. They're hoarding talent and they kind of give everyone labels and names and they incubate them and hothouse them and all that stuff.
Focus
and it's like,
group testing.
these are our wrestlers. No one else can have them. Whereas there, it's kind of like, what the fuck are you going to do? Go to TNA? Not, it felt like it spoke to the arrogance, I guess, of the time.
But also, like, what are you supposed to do with a character like that? Like, genuinely, the best wrestler in the world would not be able to make fucking anything from that.
I know.
It's a bullshit gimmick.
At least with Skip Sheffield, there wasn't an adjective in there.
Yeah, and Skip Sheffield was fun.
Yeah, and I think he had enough leeway that you could kind of break out of it a little bit. But like, Husky Harris, he could amaze you in the ring, but just hearing his name be said, and it was an immediate joke with fans and all that.
Yeah, of course it was, because that's the point, and that's what's so scummy.
So at the time, NXT was being revamped, and they were deciding after some particularly supremely unsuccessful later seasons, 4 and 5 in particular, that they were going to completely revamp NXT. Triple H was going to be given some responsibilities with the development of talent. It was going to be their official hub, and they were going to start making a television show featuring that developmental talent and try and prepare them for the main roster, as opposed to squeeze. It was like kind of unripened fruit that you're trying to squeeze juice out of, was what original NXT was. And the idea was that there were a few people who maybe could go back, who'd maybe been on the roster for a little bit, but would head back to NXT, get a little bit of seasoning or something like that. It could be a way to perhaps repackage some folks. Now, whose idea this was is interesting to perhaps dissect, because the documentary they released would have you believe that Triple H was like, hang on a second, that name is cruel. I want to right this wrong, me personally.
Yeah, and I now know, Triple H, I'm me, that Husky Harris is a bullying name, and that's why I'm rebranding him. Bullshit. Bull fucking shit. Triple H has never given a shit about a guy being bullied for being fat. If anything, I believe Triple H was probably one of the people doing the bullying and having a horrible little giggle. I choose to believe it's William Regal.
I think
he made the call, but either way, I think it's a good one.
The good idea that they did have, and Triple H was a part of, was like, look, we have all this talent. We can't just be chucking them on TV, not ready. We've put a bunch of people on TV before they were ready. Why not utilize them and try? I think at the very least, they thought that Wyndham could have been used as a body to train someone else up.
Well, because the character Husky Harris just sucks.
Yeah.
And
he was on TV for 2 years or thereabouts with that gimmick,
But it's just not one that you want to put momentum behind, because it's one that's made up as a joke to make your boss laugh. That's not a good enough reason to push him.
And all those lads in that Nexus group were presented so much as bodies to be destroyed that anyone who was in there needed a hard reset.
And I think it's genius to send him back down to Florida, because I feel like he was so inspired. I mean, he's from kind of the Florida area.
He's from Florida,
anyway,
yeah.
And it feels like so much of his character, the character Bray Wyatt, is influenced by Floridian culture.
Yes, like the kind of the tales of the people from the swamps and
the
stuff
bayou.
like that, a little mixed in with the more modern Florida man craziness and whatnot. I think the idea of getting a bunch of talent, sticking them under a roof where they're going to learn drills and get ready for TV, but at the same time you've got William Regal, Dusty Rhodes, you got a load of really good hands in there like Steve Kern or Norman Smiley, to basically ensure that if there is cream, it will rise to the top. And I think there was very much you're not on major TV. It was kind of a leveling of the playing field.
I think it's such a good idea, because it means that you can, if you fail, you don't fail publicly and famously in front of the whole world. You're not ruined professionally for the rest of your life. The stakes are a bit lower, but it also means if you do find your character and your voice, there's like only massive opportunities for you there.
You do hear often, this idea that you need to have this like ruthless cutthroat competition, and otherwise, like, you won't be able to get the best out of people. I think maybe in some situations that works. I think of like Kevin Owens told the story recently of when he was signed to NXT, and after NXT had been running for a couple of years, it was like him and Finn Balor and Kenta were in a room, and they were sat on one side, and all the other NXT people on the other side, and Triple H is like, they're the stars, they're coming for your job, you have to prove yourself against them, and he wanted to inject this like hyper competitive nature
Jesus Christ,
and you made a few diamonds, but you crushed a lot of people to dust in the same way. But we've all been on on this developmental journey together. We were in Florida Championship Wrestling, now we're in this nice performance center. Let's do some improv together, and I think that way you got to see, like, I don't think a Bray Wyatt character could have been formed in a hyper competitive, super cutthroat environment. It needed this collaborative, dare I say, very drama school feeling situation they had.
Very drama school. And not just like the character, but I think as well, the man, Wyndham Rotunda, the locker room leader, also could only be born from that type of environment, that comradeship. You hear so many wrestlers who trained in FCW talk about the bonds they make in that time as carrying them through the rest of their professional career. It, like, during injuries even, which is a really hard thing for most wrestlers to get through. And that's the type of thing I think that's really lost when you have that kind of like high pressure, super competitive environment where it's that cutthroat.
Now, I think this gets attributed wrongly to just something that happened in NXT, because they did do this in FCW as well. But that idea of getting some people together, doing your promo class with Dusty Rhodes, where you have to speak for 60 seconds.
Yeah, 90
if you ask. And then Bray, like, this is a character that clearly had been fermenting for a long, long time. I think a lot of the frustrations that he'd been dealing with on the road, and then those long drives between the shows where he was going to get kicked in the head by Randy Orton again. This is where this character starts, because it doesn't feel like something that kind of, it was, this piece here and this piece here. How fully formed it seems when you just see him against like a black curtain in front of his peers, and Dusty Rhodes being like, "That's some good shit, Daddy." Because the inspiration is clearly there from Waylon Mercy.
Waylon Mercy, yeah. You've got Robert De Niro from Cape Fear.
And it's funny, actually, Dan Spivey, who actually played Waylon Mercy, he actually came very early doors when NXT was starting up, and he met with Bray, and he gave him the blessing, gave him some tips, like, do this, recommended some of the shirts and stuff like that he should wear.
That's so cool.
Specifically saying the white pants, and all the stuff like that. And I think that was just very cool that there was that kind of passing over of like, you're going to run with this in a way that I couldn't have necessarily.
Which again, I feel like a lot of wrestlers would feel threatened by that, and it's so smart, I think, to not be and instead encourage it, because like his legacy is far more remembered. Like, his name is mentioned in documentaries now because of Bray
and that
being inspired by him.
Makes me so fucking happy. Like, that is the case, because he, like, I remember like the Waylon Mercy video I had was like 240p, like the lowest shitty quality from a VHS rip I downloaded on LimeWire, and now the WWE Vault is like uploading like compilations that include him, his matches, stuff like that. Fantastic stuff.
So yeah, the inspirations were, some obvious, and then some were really surprising.
Yeah, this was really mind-blowing to me, where even, actually, the name Bray, in fact, came from.
Bray Wyatt, the name, is inspired by a friend of his, Bray Wyatt.
Bray Wyatt seemed, from first glance, and I know you've read up a little bit more about him, Joe, to be an extremely interesting Florida man.
Yes, so Bray Wyatt was a guy he went to college with, I believe, or high school, who was renowned for getting into horrifying, like, accidents, like car accidents.
Jesus.
To the point where I actually Googled this guy's name, and there was an article in, like, the Tampa Bay Times about his numerous injuries and accidents that he's been in. Like, the article I read was written in 2003, and at that point he had been in 3 separate car accidents, one of which sent him out through a side windshield where he'd had gashes all over his face, he'd nearly broken his neck. But the more recent one was the one that got him this article, and it's like a drunk driver ran into him and his friend when they were driving a car, and they rammed him off the road, and the Bray Wyatt wasn't wearing a seatbelt because he's kind of a crazy guy. And he then got sent out of the car, and he broke his like neck and his ribs and stuff. He had all these horrible injuries.
He had a nerve damage or something in his head.
Yes,
yeah.
He had some kind of nerve damage in his face, which meant he couldn't feel his head. And so, according to Bray Wyatt, he was inspired by Bray Wyatt because Bray Wyatt would, as a party trick, go and like headbutt stuff because he couldn't feel it, and it was like funny for people to see him like fuck his own face up.
So the idea of this guy who kind of believed he was impervious to pain, even though he probably actually wasn't. There is a kind of like a recklessness and kind of a scariness of, you don't know what this guy is going to do because he seems to not really know what he is capable of and is willing to test the limits. That's a huge part of that Bray Wyatt character.
It's just so funny because if you look up Bray Wyatt, because in your mind you're like, oh, he must look a bit like Bray Wyatt. No. He's just this like high school jock, like football athlete who is just like, oh, check this out.
And like all these bits together, like it's not just a simple case of, because I think a lot of times in wrestling there is a belief that the character needs to be like, you should be able to sum it up in kind of one sentence, or like, he is this. And like a lot of times when he was on the main roster of Bray, it's just kind of like, he's a crazy redneck, or he's a Duck Dynasty, or just something that a casual viewer flipping through could latch onto. But there's so many layers to it from the word go. He is this like cult-like figure who obviously has influence from the likes of Jim Jones and what happened at Waco and whatnot. But there's also kind of a bit of a serial killer element to him. There is a preacher element to him. There is very much like kind of a, televangelist quality to him about reaching out to people. But there's also the classic Southern gentleman. Like a big part of Waylon Mercy's whole thing was that he'd come and he'd shake the referee's hand and the opponent's hand, and Vince McMahon would be like, I don't think he means that when he's shaking their hand. It feels quite disingenuous to me, quite frankly. But Bray would present himself as, like, he wouldn't scream at you. He'd speak very softly and gently. There's a little bit of a Jake the Snake Roberts in there.
Massively, yeah, totally.
There is a cryptic nature to the way that he speaks that I believe that some fans, and there's a lot of fans out there who want literalism, or they want to understand, what do you mean when you say that? And I understand that as much as the next person, as a guy who spent countless hours over the years like trying to find out, what does this actual bit in this episode of Twin Peaks mean? But what does this bit in Death Stranding mean? I need to know exactly what they mean when she says I'm fragile but not that fragile. What does she actually mean though? Whereas Bray, I feel like a lot of the intent when he's speaking is to let you get a bit bamboozled. The character, by its nature, is someone who's trying to deceive you and let these honeyed words wash over you and lull you into either a false sense of security or to confound you with being like, what do you mean by that? For wrestling fans who I think maybe want a simple, like, I'm coming to this town on this date and I'm going to beat you in this type of match with this move, it is probably one of the more frustrating characters that's out there. But my counter to that is, well, he worked heel, so if you really hate how he sounds,
you can boo him if you like.
He'll probably get beaten as well very often. But from his first appearance on NXT, it was very clear straight away, like, it's not like the Bray maybe parts from evolve, but what he is from the first moment you see him on your screen. And I don't think there's many wrestlers who have that fully formed nature of their character from the word go, And early doors, you have, of course, Bo Dallas being pegged for success in his own right. And I don't think you can rely on perhaps their family connection, which I think a lot of people were waiting kind of constantly for WWE to pair them up together. The idea, though, that Bray would have a family was, even from his earliest pre-debut when he's doing his improv skits, he would always have kind of people stood behind him and whatnot. Actually, one of the guys was Eli Cottonwood, who was one of the NXT Season 2 alums, who was given the unfortunate task of being asked to cut a promo about a mustache and bombed so hard he basically was out of wrestling forever afterwards. But the idea that you would pair him up with someone who had maybe the right look, enter John Huber, better known as Luke Harper in WWE circles, and these two were an absolute dynamite, perfect pairing in more ways than one.
Yeah, they're very cute together, these two.
The strength of their friendship and their bond, because I think they were both guys who were like, I think because of the nature of their characters, they weren't necessarily doing loads of interviews while they were alive talking about their relationships with one another, but it seems to be that their friendship, their bond was like, if anything, they downplayed it on television. These guys were like best friends from the word go, and a perfect chemistry as well, with one guy who can't help but talk constantly and the other guy who just has the faraway look in his eyes. It did kind of, this is around the point where we were like looking at this part of his career when like I was struck with kind of quite a oof.
Yeah, what grief.
Yeah, because, you know, we did a John Huber episode, you know, a couple of years back, and that's another one where I still feel like I'm you know, with wrestling, I feel like the older I've gotten, the less I've been able to actually grasp when people have died, which I thought was strange. I spent so much of my teens and 20s being bombarded with grief and feeling so sad all the time about favourite wrestlers dying tragically young, that some of these characters who meant so much to me in my adult years, I still am waiting for the music to hit and for him to kind of come back or whatever. But it was hard watching some of these points of them together, because there was a lot of footage of them kind of goofing around in between takes and stuff that you never in a million years would have seen when they were alive, you know?
No.
But yeah, these two were sweet together for sure.
Yeah, I think they both got on so well with so many people. Like, they were both so kind to everyone they worked with.
Yeah, everyone, countless stories of like how they were, you know, lifted up by them, helped by them.
Reassuring people backstage when they were like anxious, or like, you know, there's some wrestler who's a nobody and they go up and they chat to them and they treat them like, you know, just like they're one of the boys. Like, it's,
I mean, Swerve Strickland, for instance, he was someone when, you know, he was in WWE, he would have been like bottom tier NXT developmental guy, and Bray would have been one of the top stars in the company, and he spoke about how he would pop in and mentor him and was like, you know, no airs whatsoever. And I think like that's something that a lot of wrestlers maybe aspire to, but find it perhaps harder to do in practice.
well, hard if Triple H is there all the time being like, no, competitive, diamond.
He'll do anything he can to take your spot.
Yeah.
Also, you're fired.
Yeah, great, helpful.
They shoot these vignettes quite early on where they're going down to the swamp and Bray speaks borderline in tongues about all the things that he's seen in the past and that he wants to lay out and whatnot. I think this is something that really stood out because they hadn't shot stuff like that in forever at that time, like you know, on location vignettes and whatnot.
Yeah, they filmed most of it down by his house.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I think it's some of the most kind of memorable imagery in wrestling, and it's been kind of cut up and recontextualized over and over again. You were telling me that you would put a filter over most of it, though, what you were saying.
I've talked about this before, but when I did my media A-levels, we had to do a thriller project. Anyone who's my age and did media will relate to this. And it's very relatable, the fact that they all filmed down by his house, because that's, again, what we all do. It was either you filmed at the school or you filmed by your house, because you couldn't have access to public locations, basically, because you needed permission. And yeah, the main thing you get taught when you make something of that genre is filters. Filters. I would have added a plain, like, nice little VHS filter over the top. It's way too HD. It's too high contrast, and the saturation is too high as well. There's too much color. You need to turn that right down. Honestly, if I had the time, I would take all these vignettes and I would do those edits, because they wouldn't take long and it would make such a difference. It's like, it makes it look like they filmed on an iPhone, but not in a good way, like in a bad way.
I mean, see, for me, I kind of like it in a weird way because it's so bright and shiny. It kind of feels like
it's done by Disney.
He's trying. That's what I kind of like, is that Bray is trying to promise you this like beautiful, clean, pristine world, and it's like, yeah, it's a HD swamp, Bray. It sounds kind of horrible, you know. But the other pieces start to come together shortly after these vignettes are filmed, where you have the rocking chair, which become a huge part of Bray's lore and whatnot. That would be brought to the ring for him to sit in. He would watch matches from the ramp while rocking in the chair.
I find the fact that he sits in the rocking chair as part of his entrance is so, again, it's poetic, because your entrance, the whole idea is you're making an entrance. You're coming in, you're walking to the ring. You should be making movement. It's like transport. And instead he's like stunted by sitting in that chair and refusing to move closer to the ring, which I find is just like, it's like, because no one else has done that. No one would dare do that, because it's like, no, it's your entrance. You have to keep going.
I think that's one of the reasons why probably Bray and Triple H got on quite as well as they did.
Definitely. You can see immediately when Triple H starts to understand Bray is when they get together over the entrance stuff.
It's Triple H's idea, I think, was to include the lantern that they would blow out and do the whole, you know, lights out in the arena and stuff like that.
It's a really cool touch.
It's so, I mean, people always talk about like how wrestling fans want to like say things, but you know, they want a word that they can repeat back. They want a promo line that they can finish for them. They want a catchphrase. But as much as that, it's like, you know, having been at wrestling shows, when the lights go out,
it's exciting.
It is. Like, for me, like, my all-time favorite live wrestling moment was probably when we saw All In 2022, and all the lights went out for Sting's entrance. And like it was completely pitch black in that big stadium.
Like anything could happen.
Yeah, it is like it's just like you as a human when you're caught up in the emotion of a wrestling show.
Yeah.
Lights out, it's exciting, and it was a huge part of his presentation was that entrance. And the next missing piece that they find is another body for the group, which is Eric Rowan, and how he gets the iconic mask. The story of that is just like. He came into the ring with them, and they're like, "We got a big bag of masks. Let's just go through them and pick one." And then this kind of crappy, cheap sheep's mask.
Immediately, Bray is like, that one.
It's so interesting to see a creative process where you have your ideas that are so fully formed, but also you are so open to collaboration, so open to the next phase of, yes, that as well. You know, that for me is like the real creative success in wrestling, when you can have a firmly, established idea in your head, but you can add to it with other people.
Because I think that he had the fundamentals he understood what he was aiming for. And so much of Bray Wyatt's character as Bray Wyatt is down to Christian imagery. And it's down to even like the things he says in promos. A lot of it is quite like religious.
Oh yeah,
passages.
Very sermon based.
Very sermon based.
Yeah.
To the point where you can then add to that gimmick, and it doesn't feel like random because he knows in his head the themes he's linking here. Like immediately the Eric Rowan mask makes sense because it's leading a lamb to slaughter, the sheep, the people,
innocence.
The innocence.
Yeah.
There's so many themes there that he's already set up
and
with his promos.
No one, Joe, ever was like, this is anti-Christian. Like no one ever, because he was, I think, confident enough in delivering it in such a manner that it never felt like, oh, you're just doing this, and I think even his biggest detractors, and a lot of people, constantly were detracting away from the style of promo, and he's just saying this, he's just saying that. None of it makes sense. I will say, right, easier said than done to be like, he just fucking rambles. We have watched hours of promos of this guy. No, like some of it was like kind of for Midland feuds, or some of it were when maybe he had less to actually say or whatnot. But I will say this. I don't think we've watched as many promos from someone, and he's not stumbled.
Nope.
There was not one missed word. And some of my favorite promos of all time, like I love Stone Cold Steve Austin's promos.
Yeah.
By God, watch your promo from him in the late 90s. That dude can't get 2 words out without fucking...
He's good at covering.
He's good at covering. As was The Rock. As is Christian or loads of wrestlers. Like Mick Foley did it all the time, where the emotion would overtake him.
But Bray doesn't need to cover. He's never made that mistake.
His control over his emotions. Like, that's the great promo. People are always like, hey, you just gotta let the emotions come out. And that is where people end up stumbling over their words, because maybe the adrenaline comes on too strong, or they get ahead of themselves, or they overthink it. It's just this, like, I think he could literally speak for 3 hours straight.
Yeah, I think so.
And not repeat himself.
But I think so much of his talent with promos isn't just that he improvises. Like, I think a lot of wrestlers, they have their points they want to get across, and then they kind of improvise. And I think he does a bit of that, but I think the way he writes is fundamentally very different to how most other wrestlers write promos, in that he's got not just bullet points of the points he has to get across, but he has, like, his... As I was saying earlier, like his themes.
Yeah.
Where you can tell if you actually pay close attention to his promos, he has written these down.
Oh, yeah.
And drafted and redrafted and adapted and changed, and then gone, okay, I'm going to read this out 100 times and see how I need to change it again.
We did hear like a lot of people speaking in the documentary and various interviews about how you would see Bray like pouring over this stuff.
Yeah.
And not just in the sense that, like, I always think of the classic Mick Foley, he's listening to Tori Amos, he's hyping himself up, pacing around, and then he does the promo from the heart. Whereas Bray, it's like, as you were saying.
It's like writing a speech.
And he's going through it, and he's immersing himself in it. I think in some ways you could lazily kind of go, he's just learning off the thing. But it's like, I think when you want to immerse yourself in your writing, it's quite a different thing. They're all deeply personal.
And they're so well written, because that's the thing. I think a lot of promos are great and they're really well performed, but his are really well written. Like, they actually, and it's fine if you don't understand. I don't want to be like, oh, you're stupid.
No, because I think a lot of the times that is maybe even the point, I guess.
Yeah, they are obtuse and they are confusing and meandering, but I don't say meandering in that's that is intentional. That's supposed to be the case. It's supposed to make you He's leading you down the path, as it were, like a lamb to slaughter, so that he can make you think a certain thing.
I think it was at its weakest, usually, that type of promo, when the people he was up against couldn't give you something that was satisfactory in response. Like, there was a lot of times where I think wrestlers tried to match his energy in the promo department.
Oh.
But it's like, when Jake Roberts spoke, very fucking, effusively or very kind of meanderingly on a topic, you wouldn't have, like, I don't know, Rick Rude opposite him being like, well, let me tell you something, Jake Roberts.
Like,
but very often, I think it's because wrestlers, the wrestlers themselves love the content, you would have a Chris Jericho or a John Cena sit across from me like, well, let me tell you something, Bray Wyatt, and now I'm going to speak very poetically and cryptically. You can't just match it.
Yeah, and also it's a skill that you have to work on. It's like the thing you were saying earlier about, like, oh, he's just, like, saying lines. It's like, well, that's what actors do, but they still win awards and are very fun and satisfying to watch. Like, it takes a lot of skill to say lines that have been written, as opposed to saying them naturally off the top of your head. Like, I don't think a wrestler like Stone Cold Steve Austin should ever be made to read off a script. Part of the issue with current wrestling is so many wrestlers are made to read scripts when their talents lie elsewhere, and that's okay. But Bray Wyatt, he was a great writer, and he could perform that writing in a really great way.
I think the more and more that we do this podcast, I've learned over the years is that there is no one right way for because I was convinced, because I grew up, in the era when they weren't scripted, and then there was like a litany of shoot reviews where wrestlers were like, as soon as it's scripted, it's the worst, it's the shits. Can you believe they handed Hulk Hogan a script? Can you believe they gave CM Punk a script or whatever? And now I'm kind of like, well, there's some wrestlers where the best thing in the world you could do is give them a script, and not all scripts are created equally, you know? A wrestler themselves writing a script, perhaps that might be the best way for that wrestler to be able to deliver that promo material.
Yeah.
So something that blew my mind even more about all of this was that during this period where Bray is, doing very well in NXT, just on the cusp of being called up, he was only 26 years old when he came to that main roster.
No.
How about that?
Nope.
I think perhaps he was like wise beyond his years, because he carried himself at this point like he was a veteran of probably 3 times as long as he'd actually been wrestling.
I think so much of that is just down to that comradeship. I think it's easier to feel confident when you've built up people around you and they build you up as well.
Yeah, because go back to our John Huber episode. He had kind of a long time on the indies, and he was very much not of the opinion that he was going to make it to the big time, yet alone to get a chance to be on TV. And I think they were one of the fastest call-ups from NXT. Like, they were there for a couple of months, and before you know it, that's it, we're taking it onto the main roster. And that was kind of one of the first big, all right, you've done well here on this show, and now you get to go into the main show, and you get to be presented larger than life, like you were on the smaller scale, but just amped up. And I think it probably put an asterisk beside the expectations of every other call-up afterwards, because I think people all assumed, oh, okay, Neville is great. He'll get called up with the same level of hype. Same with Bo Dallas. Same with all the other people from NXT who were doing well at the time.
I think the lesson to be learned there was for WWE, and they didn't learn that lesson, which is, if you've got a finished product that works well on NXT, don't change it when you move it up to the main show. Because that's the mistake I saw happen again and again and again.
Yeah, tinkering with it or whatnot.
They're like, oh, we've got this great established character who's hot as hell on NXT. Let's bring them up into the main show and completely change everything.
Yes, let's bring them to the main show where the boss will see them for the first time ever. That. But the kind of whole process, it felt, of calling them up, it felt a lot more involved and engaged. Like, they had people from the main roster writing team would visit, and they would see the NXT shows, and they would kind of hear about the ideas they had for the character. So it felt like they were kind of had a bit of momentum behind them. They weren't bringing them up just because it was time to bring them up. They were bringing them up because they had ideas for them. And their debut was a fabulously executed bit of business, because it was just like something you'd only seen in that small Full Sail crowd being done in front of a huge arena. And there was, I remember, a big worry and anxiety at the time that, oh, the only people watching that NXT show are the freaks, like, because it wasn't being broadcast on TV in America. No one's going to know who this guy is. It's going to be kind of an underwhelming response. And it was like, people knew straight away. To the extent where Bray's first night, where they attacked Kane and had the Wyatt family lay him out, there was Husky Harris chants in the arena. And I remember the backlash that online. Mick Foley wrote this big blog about how fans had lost their way and all that. And they didn't let it faze them. And, within a couple of weeks, the Husky Harris chants, I don't even think week 2 there were any Husky Harris chants. But that was showing you the degree to which fans were cynical at the time.
Yeah.
You were going to a WWE show in 2013 as much to hijack it as you were to be like, oh, because all my favorites are going to be there. You would go there expecting your favorites were going to be underutilized. You were going there to chant the name of your favorite who wasn't getting booked at that time. It was quite a... It feels like a lifetime ago now. We're in 2025. WWE, I feel they could just spin a spotlight around the arena and people would scream non-stop for 2.5 hours straight. They love the product so much. The benefit of him was that he was extremely different from the very homogenized characters of the time, because most people on the WWE roster were not fantastical characters. The only ones who really were the likes of Kane, who'd been hanging around for a long time.
And he was corporate Kane at that point, wasn't he?
Now, this was pre-corporate Kane.
Right.
So, this was actually one of the ways that they kind of wrote him out. They had an Inferno match as Bray's first match as well. I remember being very worried that Eric and Harper wouldn't get brought up with them. That they did. I was like, okay, this will be all right. They know what they're doing at least. So the idea of Bray was that they were going to use him as this kind of almost like boss character, where he was a very established villain. They would have the unfair advantage of having the Wyatt family constantly interfere on his behalf. Even though he was a very intriguing, interesting, different character, I was amazed that they managed to get the amount of heat that they did quite early on. And they were kind of, I guess, booked in kind of a typical villain role in that sense. But it was in 2014 when we really got to see what Bray could do in ring, and they started to pair them up against another team that had been taking the WWE by storm in the previous year, which was The Shield. And here we come full circle now to talk about the first match of the modern product of the time that I showed you.
Yay!
And then our first match then is, of course, The Shield versus the Wyatt family from the Elimination Chamber in 2014. A match that I have watched many, many times, both professionally and in a just... this is one of my favorite matches of all time atmosphere. It's like putting on a nice pair of comfy pajamas, this match, Joe. Very excited. Had you remembered much of it from your last viewing of it? Were you excited to get into it again?
I was very excited to get into it again. I didn't remember much specifics. Just the general dynamic, I think, of the Shield versus the Wyatt family is very memorable.
Yeah, and I think as well, you could tell the difference a year makes from because I think we did SummerSlam 2013 on Pay-Per-View Classic not that long ago, which is actually would have been his debut match, and seeing the energy that both the Shield and the Wyatts have kind of individually injected into this audience, and then as soon as even before they even touch in the ring, there are dueling chants, the audience are stood on their feet.
So this is awesome chant within seconds of the bell ringing.
I fucking love that even with all the excitement, Bray takes his sweet, long, laboured almost time getting to the ring. I think it's probably one of the all-time entrances in wrestling.
Oh, definitely.
It is
so good.
So fantastic. The music as well, I think we should probably mention, in regards to all these elements being so well thought out and all that, the musician was a relative unknown at the time.
That's so cool.
Bray had just found it on SoundCloud, I think.
Wow.
And was went to the people straight away being like, please license this song, call them up, pay him what he needs. This is the music for the character. And I think it was just kind of cool that, I don't know, using a bit of a creative flex in that way.
And it's just great, objectively great music, which I think wrestling has a lot of great music, but it's unusual in wrestling for the music to be good outside of wrestling.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't work for wrestling music.
Yeah, and yet it works because of him.
Yeah, it's all about the entirety of the presentation.
Yeah.
I feel like in this day and age in wrestling where I can't even have a song for 6 months without them changing it because... I don't know, the AI ticker turns over and they have to have a new, even worse version of their song or whatever. This one stands the test of time, and I was not ready for because I don't think I'd watched much Wyatt stuff in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Not intentionally or anything like that, but I was just flooded with good emotions, I will say. Obviously I didn't want to be kind of morbid or anything like that, but it was just... It hit very, very strong. I had nostalgia for it, obviously, but just feeling and appreciating what an excellent... you can look back now 10 years later and kind of go, this was perfect. They
It's
hit
an
it.
old-timer presentation, like whole total package.
To the point where I was thinking, this is still a match, even with WWE firing on all cylinders now and being so inviting to the casual audience member. I would still say, if you want someone to get into wrestling, I'd maybe say show them this.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that with nostalgia. I'm saying that with just kind of like, you've got a great mix of 6 very distinct personalities, 2 very distinct teams.
Yes.
But it doesn't feel like there's, even though Bray is the leader, it doesn't feel like, oh, it's just all about Bray and these are the guys aren't important, or it's all about Roman Reigns who's on the other team and these are the... Everyone is important in their own right. There's all these little dynamics at play. I feel every time I watch the match, I take something new away from it.
Definitely, I agree with that.
A lot of this time I was kind of dwelling on the fact that Dean Ambrose in the group is kind of feeling the need to kind of puff his chest out a little bit more.
I love this version of the Shield so much because they're so different to where each guy has gone.
Yeah.
Like, you've got Roman Reigns with his eyebrow piercing, pouting all the time, and you've got like crazy Dean Ambrose who's always like flinging himself around like a mad squirrel, and then you've got like the cool guy Seth Rollins, and each member of the Shield has a different dynamic with each other member of the Shield.
And as a whole as well.
A whole, yeah. And then the same kind of thing applies actually to the Wyatt family as well.
Because that's more of a straight hierarchy. Because it's like, Bray's the leader, Luke is the lieutenant, and, you know, Rowan is the bottom of the heap. And there's just something about, like, always when Luke and Rowan are interacting, he'll like pull him by the beard, he'll slap him and stuff like that. And you don't have Rowan being like, it's no, like, no, kind of, this is what you do to me. This is, you know, this is my role.
Yeah.
It is very subversive in its own right, you know. I think with Bray having such a strong character, I think a lot of people in wrestling can easily do characters in promos, maybe do them in squash matches, or do them in certain types of matches. But this guy is all character all the time. The only person I would say I could even draw a remote comparison to is Mick Foley, because I feel like Jake Roberts is one of the all-time great characters in wrestling, and he certainly wrestles like his character talks and all that, but he still wrestles a wrestling match or whatever. But like Bray, like when he's on the apron, when he's talking to Harper, he speaks a certain way. When he's calling out individual members of the Shield, he has a different way in his mind. He thinks he's going to manipulate them. Even this time I was looking at how he spoke to the referee.
Yeah.
And he spoke to the referee in this like really kind of like somewhat condescendingly sweet manner or whatever that really reminded me of Waylon Mercy. But it's easy to do it in a squash match where you're just kind of throwing someone around and showing you what your character is. But he is managing to be a competitive wrestler who is still a cult-like messiah figure. It's really, really masterful stuff, I think. Also, I think as well, like it's quite hard to define who's a good guy and who's a bad guy in this match.
In this match in particular, because the Shield are going through something right now. Like, you've got Roman being like, oh, you're told he's the leader, even though he kind of doesn't act like it.
He doesn't claim himself to be the leader. It's just other people say it for him.
You've got unhinged Dean Ambrose, who, I love the little detail at the start when just the two teams are facing off, and Dean is like walking into the back of Roman, trying to make it look as though he's being held back. And then you've got Seth, who's I think supposed to be kind of more like the brains of the operation. And you just feel like the Shield, because like so many of the Shield's matches are about them being a really cohesive like brotherhood, like a fraternity as it were. And instead it feels like they're kind of at odds with each other. And you can see then Bray seeing that and then using that to his advantage to try and separate them and make them kind of think about the dynamics themselves.
And I love the dynamic even in the Wyatt family is it isn't like kind of, oh, they just, you know, Bray just points and they do it. There's a chaos to them.
And also there is like there's a brotherhood for them as well. They work so well as a team that in ring, you're being told this story of the Shield. They used to do all these certain moves together as a team, and they're not doing them as much anymore. Whereas you've got the Wyatt family who are doing these team moves, and they're doing it really effectively because they've got this cohesive leader who knows how to keep them all in their place.
I love how it's not just that like Bray has to tell them to do things. They have these instincts. Like if Bray at any point in the match, if anyone lays a hand on him, the next thing, without question, is always, either Harper or Rowan will stop what they're doing to get vengeance for Bray for someone having laid hands on him or whatever it is. They're either like protecting him or avenging him at all times. And that kind of gives it this kind of like, they're not like kind of, hey, we're super like, you know, teamwork, double team moves and all that stuff. It is more kind of like, they're driven by like an animal instinct almost. But like what is so impressive about it is that Bray is so underrated as an in-ring worker. It's one of the reasons we wanted to watch this, because the speed at which you have all these guys coming in, like they're working at a rate that would easily fit in the 2025 supposedly much higher standard of work than there would have been maybe at this point in time. And you know, there is an insane amount of strength on display from him. He is, I think, low-key one of the stronger guys that you will see in wrestling. And I think that old Stone Cold Steve Austin tell of who's the best wrestler, watch that man hit the ropes.
Oh my God.
Like, Mike, and that's where I feel like the Jake Roberts comparisons perhaps fall by the wayside, because Jake Roberts would always work smarter, not harder, and that worked to his character. But Bray is like, man, he is very much, if anything, like kind of a swan where he's paddling like constantly without you trying to see it. You know?
I think that as well helps with the whole thing of them not being just an overt heel group, because like it would be easy, I think, with that dynamic to have, because he's like the manipulative leader, for him to not really have to do much in the ring, and instead he's leading by example. Like he can do anything that he wants his guys to do,
and he has that kind of bloodlust as well. Like there's times where like Harper has stuff like completely in control and he'll start screaming attack me, because he wants to he wants to get his hands dirty. And I think that is one of the things that makes him different from your typical kind of cult-like figure in wrestling, when they would usually be kind of hands off and let the goons do it or whatever it is. I think the match's structure, where it kind of escalates from just kind of in-ring chaos to then it's spreading outside, spilling over into the ramp and stuff like that, into the audience. Dean kind of disappears at one point, which then just gives you this beautiful little bit of story of Seth getting overpowered by trying to keep everything together. And then you get the feeling that Roman could probably do all this on his own.
Yeah.
And he doesn't yet realize it. Because Roman doesn't kind of say, hey, stand back, I'll take care of it. No. It's only when there's no other option but Roman to take care of it himself. And the Wyatts, as frustrating as it would be at times for them to kind of be reduced to villains or bodies or whatever it was, they are incredible foils for someone like a Roman Reigns because of their size.
Yeah.
And I think that Roman, like, he is obviously an extremely strong individual, but Eric Rowan, I think, doesn't get his credit whatsoever.
I know, he's great.
That dude gets tossed around so willy-nilly, and he is an actual giant.
Yeah.
You pointed out when we watched the segment of them debuting and beating up Kane.
I was like, where's Kane?
Kane looks small.
Oh,
Kane's
it's
huge.
That small man, that small red man must be Kane.
So then you have the Wyatts ending up circling Roman, and like Bray just like having that wicked smile appear on his face at the most perfect moment. Him knowing when to hit those story beats to actually like make it mean so much more, because it elicits an extra reaction out of the audience to see them realizing in real time, we're doing to the Shield what they've done to everyone else.
But I love that he doesn't overham it. It would be very easy in WWE to be told, oh, turn to the camera and smirk. Like, he doesn't do that. It's a kind of a gentle, you're with me for the ride, I'm not telling you what to feel right now.
He does a masterful job at taking advantage of WWE having those close-up cameras and stuff like that, where he can kind of convey the subtlety or whatnot. And I think as bad as WWE's production would get in the years that came after this moment, I think this was actually quite a good example of, okay, the camera cuts and stuff that they do, they worked really well because they were all in service of seeing the facial expressions. It told the story much, much better. Roman fighting off the entire Wyatt family on his own, and he's just about to seal the deal, where the one thing that the Wyatts can do that the Shield can't, which is to be completely selfless, Harper dives in front of Roman and eats the finish so that Bray can then basically sacrifice Roman at his own feet. Fantastic. I will say as well, from watching a lot of Bray stuff with you, that dude does this snap cross body block.
Oh, it's like one of my favorite moves
where he goes
in
bleh,
wrestling.
And then he just goes bam.
I just hate the name. Because for me, a crossbody, you go across the body, and he doesn't. He like rugby tackles them.
Yeah, it's almost like a pounce, like Monty Brown used to do, whatever. But he is got some explosive, snappy offense. the Sister Abigail complete with the kiss. One of my all-time favorite matches, and one
Yeah.
that I think that like a real test of a match is. When I first saw this, I was blown away. I showed it to you the first time, and I was like, "Oh, this match is really fucking good."
Yeah, I remember you saying
and then just
that.
like watching it here again, like we've done it previously on the podcast series. I know we've repeated it, but yeah, I love it even more. I think every time I watch it, I gain appreciation. Dare I say, I might guess what your rating is for it, Joe.
Go on, guess.
Is it a solid 5?
It is. It's a solid 5. It's
Hell
a perfect
yes.
match. Genuinely, what would you improve?
No, it is a perfect match.
Yeah.
It's a perfect match that gets 6 individuals over, 2 teams. Like you can look back on this match. I think like if you're telling the story of the Shield, you have to see this match. If
Yes.
you're telling the story of Luke Harper or Bray Wyatt, like all the individuals and the units, their stories. This match is like the nexus point of all of them. You get rid of this match and none of their stories make sense.
And for me, as a someone who basically, I don't think I'd watched a single match at this point. Like, this was the first match I ever watched. Like, even including classic stuff, that was segments I watched. It just showed me immediately 6 different styles.
Yeah.
6 different characters that can tell a story in ring.
And that was it, because it wasn't just like, oh, people are going through tables and being set on fire, or Bray made the ring into maggots and worms or anything like that. The spooky stuff in inverted commas was all just behind Bray's eyes and in his mind. It wasn't actually anything other than a classic wrestling match. I feel like an old timer could watch that and be like, that's a great wrestling match, That is managing to captivate an audience in real time. Like, when an audience are that excited and you live up to their excitement, because boy, the worst feeling in the world in wrestling is when they're chanting "This is awesome" before the bell rings, and then they don't chant anything until they see the signature moves at the end. This one lives up to the hype and then some. One of the all-time greatest wrestling matches as far as I'm concerned from WWE. So, of course, the excitement factor and doing so well as he did in all those situations with the likes of the Shield and being with the big names like Kane, etc. It's quite early on then that Bray finds himself paired up with the big man himself, John Cena, for a WrestleMania showdown, where Bray, it felt at that point, was doing like what most good heels often did at that era and the years before, which is you get over as a heel for long enough, fans will start becoming on your side and start cheering for you. And I think there was so much about the Wyatts that was enjoyable that people ended up... And he started the whole sing-song of doing he's got the whole world in his hands to be this kind of ominous thing that Bray was like kind of controlling people. And I think there's so many heels that when audiences start cheering them, the obvious thing is to be like, shut up. This, the one I always
Time to ruin the gimmick.
The one I always loved was when I was growing up, like in 98, The Rock had a similar thing where he was a bad guy, but he had loads of cool catchphrases, and people would start doing along with him. He'd be like, shut up, this isn't Sing Along with The Rock. You keep your jabroni mouth shut. And I'd be like, he said jabroni. Whereas Bray, looking back on this, his attempt to weave this fandom into being like, I'm actually more scary, because he would sing, I've got the whole world in my hands, people would sing along with him, and he'd go, because I'm controlling people, I'm making people fall for my lies and my twisted worldview.
I mean, he's got the whole world in his hands. It's about God.
It's about God, yes.
And he's saying that he is God.
I think, like, it's quite... It almost went over people's heads. I think it's safe to say, because I think there were a lot of people who were cheering him and singing the song because they loved him as a performer and they loved the character. And then to try and turn that into, like, oh, this is bad, and John Cena has to fight against it and save the souls of all these wayward fans. And the way we do this is by having a big clash at WrestleMania where John just beats his ass. And I think the unfortunate frustration with Bray is, I think other than the Firefly Funhouse match, he lost every single match he ever had at WrestleMania.
Oh, really?
And I think being positioned as that kind of a endgame boss, but not a final boss, not like a god tier guy.
That's quite like Kane, isn't it?
Yeah, you end up probably eating a lot more, because like, people like the character, it doesn't matter if you lose, because
you need something for the hero to overcome.
And he often was the thing that the hero had to overcome. Yeah. And the hero often overcame him over and over and over again. That being said, some of the interactions with John at this time is just so fucking weird. I'll never forget when he brought out like the entire choir of kids.
Yeah.
And be like, come on everybody, sing about the little itty bitty babies that I got in my hands, man. And there was the one match they had, the cage match, which ended with a little boy with a distorted voice going,
And the kid looks so scared.
and then Bray like putting his hand on the boy and being like, it was pretty freaky stuff. And I think like at the time, it felt like perhaps they were pushing the limits of what the Bray Wyatt character could do. But I think like at the end of the day, fans believed that wins and losses mattered. And it was at this point that you start to feel like a bit of his momentum was slipping away from him. Because when a guy talks that big elusive game and then once the bell rings, he ends up losing all the time. You know, I think we had a lot of tweets and messages from people about this character, about saying that it was such a frustrating character for them to be a fan of because he would build you up with all these spectacular promos and stories and then he would lose and you'd feel deflated and then he'd do it all over again. And it kind of felt like every time that happened, the patience went down a little bit more and more and more, you know?
Yeah.
The character would, like, evolve along the way. Like, he would kind of add different elements to him. The look would change. You know, he added kind of a swamp element to his character as we got into the 2014, 2015 era and stuff like that. But something I found very refreshing from watching the documentary was that, unlike a lot of the other spooky characters from the past, he very much dispelled the myth that you had to somehow be, you know, cut off from the fans and you couldn't interact with fans. The amount of footage that we got to see of him being with like young fans, young and old alike, and being basically the experience you'd want to have while meeting a wrestler. He very much seems to understand what his kind of role was in a lot of people's lives.
I think he was lucky in some respect, or maybe lucky's not the right word, but the fact that his character Bray Wyatt is not at odds to his real life personality. Like, he's a charming, nice guy who's friendly to everyone. He gets on with everyone.
Passionate about his creativity.
Yeah. And the character Bray Wyatt, it makes sense for him to be charismatic and charming and nice to people because it's his mind games.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think back to like Undertaker when I was watching wrestling as a kid and he was the personification of evil and potentially a vessel for Satan and all these other things. And I remember like a lot of him in the late 90s was them like pitching him as like, oh, my fans are the creatures of the night. And they'd show like kind of all the goth kids in the audience be like, I love you, Undertaker. And look, I've never met Mark Calloway, but he is not that guy. Like, that was a character that he played. And to my mind, he played it very, very well. And if you were a very emotive, emo, goth, alternative kid or whatever, and you went up to the Undertaker and he said like, man, your stuff spoke to me when you drank blood or whatever it was, like, I think he'd be like, hey, that's cool, man. Yeah, man, whatever. But like seeing like Bray, like there was like footage we saw of like Bray being like introduced to like a little like fucking 4-year-old dressed up as the Fiend, and he was like, oh my god, that's amazing.
Like, are you trying to scare me?
That's so cool, man. I love that. That's why I do this. Or like, you know, a dude in like his late 20s who's dressed up as him and he's like clearly really nervous and he's like, you know, you helped me through really tough times. You've no idea how much you mean to me. And him being like, thank you so much for saying that. And like just being able to relate to people. Like, obviously it's a gimmick, but I think he has a better understanding. He had a better understanding of what that character meant to people, more so than anyone else who reached out to that kind of alternative fan base.
Because I don't think it's a gimmick in the sense of how we think of gimmicks. Like, when I think of gimmicks, I think of it almost as like a hat that's put on someone's head. And that's not what the gimmick is to him.
It's
like,
all from the inside.
It's from the inside.
Yeah.
Like, he created those characters. He created that gimmick. And one of the reasons he created them in the way he did is because he wanted to connect to his audience. So him seeing his audience reflected back at him like that, I imagine was just like the most validating and rewarding thing ever, because it meant he achieved what he set out to achieve.
Yeah, I think the outpouring of support to him, like constantly at points when his career felt like he was reaching lows, like I think he never lost that core fan base. And like, you know, I will say, obviously him passing away has a large part to do with it, but people have been very, very open and upfront about how much he meant to him in their messages to us. And it's been very like, you know, like, I'm not going to pretend that he meant to me what he meant to a lot of people. Like, I didn't reach for Bray Wyatt promos or matches in my darkest moments or anything like that. But I think there's a lot of people who, you know, when this podcast started, they were teenagers and you know, who's to say? Like, I always view wrestling characters that I love now, where I'm like, if I was a kid, who would have been my favorite?
Oh my god, I would have been obsessed
and
with
I
him.
would have been obsessed with him, absolutely times 1,000,000. Like in the documentary, they talk about, you know, him being fed to the Undertaker at a WrestleMania as being this like really important moment for the Undertaker, and it's like Undertaker had lost his streak at that point. His career was definitely ending, and that's one of the reasons why it's been very hard for you in this podcast. You started watching wrestling when Undertaker's career was in a very long, slow, arduous winding up phase. And I remember like just being so fucking miffed and dispirited that Bray Wyatt, who they were like telling you on commentary, he's going to be like the new Undertaker, the new face of fear. And like they had the gall in the documentary for the Undertaker who's narrating it to be like, boy, it sure helped my confidence to beat Bray Wyatt in...
Jesus Christ.
Folks, you watch that match, like, I don't know how much confidence it could help you to, like, beat a hot character in, like, 5 minutes with a pin could drop in the audience.
So insulting to be like, this is the next year. Oh, no, he's lost. Sorry, he's not as good as you, I guess.
I now pass the torch
to
myself.
Yeah, good thing you've got another, 30 years of your career left? Fucking hell.
But the thing about this that was really heartwarming was to find out that even when there were frustrations for him in his career and in his character's direction, he was using his opportunity as being such a huge part of the WWE and being one of the big merchandise movers and being one of the big kind of names. He used that just to continuously mentor people who were coming in, people who were like, you know, young and old. That was like a huge part of his role, and I think one of the reasons why he had such kind of an impact on his peers. It wasn't just, man, what a cool character, I wish I could be that. He was there like helping people become that. Like Becky Lynch even told a story, I think you were telling me about, like how he like took time to help her when she first was doing a match involving a table, and he's like, I'll teach you how to use a fucking table.
It was literally,
like, you know?
She didn't know, because I don't know if you remember, like when we started watching those matches where the women were allowed to use tables. It's wild to say now.
I know,
like,
but yeah.
There was a time not that long ago where they weren't allowed to use tables in their matches. Not as in like it was forbidden, but just like it was something that was for the men.
Yeah.
The men have the table spots, the women don't. And so when it finally came to the women getting to do those table spots, they weren't even shown how to set it up. And so he took the time to be like, okay, if you're going to do a table spot, you need to know how to set it up, because you cannot learn this in the ring. It's humiliating. Trust me, I know.
Yeah.
Like, you do not want to be doing this on the fly. Here, I'll show you. We'll practice it.
I think the most inspirational thing I would say about him is the fact that I know that he's someone who had struggles with depression, and that has been kind of, you know, there's not a whole lot out there about that. I think obviously it's a private thing. You know, I happily will say that I've struggled with depression in the past. I know that, you know, it's something that a lot of our listeners have as well. To be able to be that kind of, I don't know, guy who seems to be synonymous with making people's lives easier behind the scenes, his peers, his co-workers, and the fans, even when he has had those struggles himself, I think that's pretty impressive stuff. You know, that is something that I think not many wrestlers necessarily would aspire to, but it's something that I'm really glad that, you know, his impact has been felt beyond his presence in wrestling for that very reason. I think the real magnetic personalities in wrestling are the ones who can draw in the egos and personalities backstage as much as the fans themselves. Hey, I've paid to see you. I'll be drawn in by you. But I think just the people who are like bigger names than him, arguably, who were like, you know, hearing Finn Balor talking about being in awe of Bray Wyatt.
Or like,
you know?
Randy Orton.
Yeah, I know, right?
But that's it. It's like Randy Orton, John Cena, all these massive, massive names. Like guys who would have been told the opposite of what Bray would have been told, which is like, you know, these guys are the future. Look at them. They're the physical specimens of the gods. And therefore the world of wrestling is on their shoulders. And they're the guys who are going up to him being like, hey, what can you teach me?
Yeah.
What can I improve? Like, I think you're the best wrestler ever. Or can I just be around you, please?
A period of time that was kind of like both sweet and sour for Bray in many respects is the next period we're going to talk about now, which is, it's quite linked to Randy Orton actually, which is 2017, where they did this long-running storyline where Randy Orton kind of infiltrated the Wyatt family, and Luke Harper, being the kind of the good soldier, was very suspicious of Randy all the way, and Bray ended up siding with Randy over his kind of his son, so to speak,
his
his brother in arms.
Time for the Wyatts.
But I kind of love about it though is showing the kind of the fallacy of Bray as a character, which is that like all cult leaders, he's an egomaniac.
Yes.
And in his mind, the sweetest prize of all was like, yeah, of course Luke Harper's going to follow me. He'll follow me to the ends of the earth. It's kind of easy to have someone who's brainwashed follow you, but Randy Orton loves me, and there was a trick that Bray constantly fell for, like happened with Bryan Danielson earlier in his career as well, where the idea that someone who would never in a million years join with him, pretending to join with him, was his ultimate blind spot.
Yeah, even though as fans it was so obvious what was going to happen and that he would turn on him.
So it's a period of time that also is noted by Bray winning his first WWE Championship at the time, and something which he noted was what helped him become a guy who, instead of having his family be all mentioned at the start of his kind of biography or whatever it is, he now becomes the guy who gets mentioned at the start of their biography and kind of eclipsing his family in many respects. Even though, of course, Barry Windham was an NWA champion, Bray becoming the WWE champion was felt like something that at one point would never happen because he'd come so close and it had eluded him so much. It led to what I look at back in retrospect is one of my favorite weirdo feuds in wrestling. And something we're going to talk a little bit now with our next match. Because Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt were a lot closer than I think they ever let on screen.
I think Bray was such a good influence on Randy Orton. Because if you've listened to our Randy Orton episode, you'll know that around, not at this time period, I'd say it happened about 4 years earlier.
Prior, yeah.
Randy went through a bit of a change, personally in his life, where he became, instead of this antagonistic bully, he became a comrade. He became a brother to these other guys. He started being a member of the locker room instead of just floating above it all.
A better influence than before. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think such an important part of that was Bray.
Yeah, I think that there was, you go back and listen to our, because we reviewed all the pay-per-views from WWE going all the way back to, I think, SummerSlam 2015? It would have been a long time ago now.
I think Adam actually made us a video about us reviewing
this match, which is Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt in the House of Horrors at Payback 2017, which is a match that at the time I remember just being entertained endlessly by for how ridiculous it was. But there was literally a tweet that Bray did to Randy a year or so afterwards, because I think in that actual review that we did, we were like, this thing is basically like Trailer Park Boys. And then seeing Randy being tweeted by Bray, where Bray said, hey Bo Bandy, remember when we had I'm sorry, what? And finding out that these guys, they knew what they were doing was silly and hokey.
Watching Trailer Park Boys together being let's do a match like that.
And I think there's a lot of people who can kind of hear that Bray Wyatt was someone who maybe had some mental health problems over the years and had legitimate career frustrations about the direction of his character. And some people had, said that he was very precious about his creative direction. But I say to that, here's a guy who maybe had some creative bumps in the road, but seemed to have had a lot of fun at the same time.
And not just fun for him, because I think often with these types of people who have these big ideas that are maybe a bit ambitious, yes, it's probably fun for them to do it, but it's the fact that he makes it fun for other people.
Yes.
You got Jock Randy Orton being please, can we do a fun match? Please, will we do a silly haunted house gimmick and we just fight on the floor and push each other into sofas?
Because I remember the WrestleMania that they had right before this was the one where Bray had kind of projected grotesque imagery onto the mat and stuff like that. I know the match isn't much, but that for me, I would say that's probably in my top 5 pops that I've ever had watching wrestling live with you, Joe. When that happened, I literally stood up and fist pumped the air. I was just, yes!
It's such a weird match.
Because I think something that was talked about in that documentary they did, which was Bray's creativity would often lead them to kind of a corner of a sort, which is okay, now we have to have a wrestling match. Because in the build-up to this, Randy Orton has set fire to Bray's swamp shack. He has desecrated the remains of Sister Abigail. He has stuck a crucifix into the ground, of which we're not entirely sure what its origin or its meaning is. And then it's okay, and now we do what exactly? Wrestling match. AEW is easy. You burn down a house, you can have the bloodiest match of all time.
Yeah, but in WWE you can't do that.
This is 2017, PG as hell WWE. We ain't taking out the forks and cinder blocks for this one, folks.
No.
We're going into the House of Horrors. Which opens with Randy Orton in a limousine in his jeans.
With no top on. So he's half, it's like, he didn't know, should he be wearing clothes or is he dressed for a match? He's like, I'll do half and half.
A little bit of both.
Top half wrestling match, bottom half normal casual clothes.
Top half party, bottom half business. Is
yeah,
that what we're going
exactly.
with here? Exactly. They did tell us in the hype up to this, they said that there will be a new level of insanity.
That is, they achieved that.
I appreciate when you give me the hyperbole. I want to say that the commitment to the bit extends to JoJo, who I believe at this point would have actually been going out with Bray. The ring announcer saying, "The following match will begin in Bray Wyatt's House of Horrors." Fantabulous bit of business, that.
So Randy drives up in his limousine, or say gets driven up in his limousine, despite the fact that he makes it known that there is no driver. Because he tries to talk to the driver and then there's nothing. And so, ooh. And then Randy steps out of the limousine, and what does he see? He sees a lawnmower driving itself backwards.
Now that is pretty goddamn horrifying.
It's the funniest thing I've ever seen, Kevin.
Achievement
it's so funny.
Unlocked, new level of insanity.
We're watching King of the Hill at the moment, and all I could think of was Howard Cale going, whoa! That lawnmower ain't right.
So I was wondering in your mind, like, because they promise you a House of Horrors.
Yeah.
Is it better to go, like, full horror, blah, this is horrible, horrifying, non-stop? Or is it fun to do, like, silly little goofs like Randy Orton's limousine door opening itself? Ooh.
Both. I think they went for both, and I think mostly they pulled that off. There's some key details here in this match which I have issue with, and it's mostly to do with the setting, like the set location.
Yeah.
But the issue is they had less than like a day to plan this.
It is this period of WWE where I think their ambitions have never been bigger in some respects. You know, Vince McMahon always said from Beyond the Mat onwards, we make movies, we don't make dusty old wrestling shows. There is obviously a huge production budget. They have more digital technology at their disposal. But also, this is the period of time where, you know, this was hard to be a wrestling fan at this point in time because the shows are being ripped up and redesigned. You know, it was around this time where we were like, we're going to have Bray Wyatt wrestle Sister Abigail.
No,
we're not. You know, there was a lot of like stuff that felt like it was being written on the fly and then been torn up, and, you know, it's only because WWE themselves, Joe, told me all over the years that that's the worst thing in the world, because that's what WCW did. And that's the worst wrestling ever, allegedly, he says, as he watches WCW every single night before bed. Thank you, WCW Vault Channel, for existing. So I think like they are working against a lot of constraints there. But you know...
My main issue is just the fact that, like, so I think we talked about this on the review when we watched it at the time, for the pay-per-view reviews. And it's the fact that, like, They have, 24 hours to turn this old house into a creepy old house. And the way they've done that is, and again, I speak from experience. I did my horror themes and stuff in school. Like, you make the lampshade jaunty, don't you? You turn the picture frame, you make it crooked. Oh, that's scary.
You pop a crucifix on the wall, you know?
Yeah, you draw, scary messages in mud on a fridge. But the main issue I have with it is it's like the attention to detail. One thing I would have done is just like throw buckets of mud around the house. Everything is too clean.
Yeah.
It looks like dirty school accommodation in that it looks modern but run down, if that makes sense. Like the walls are painted white. That's not right for the theme. Like the whole genre is supposed to be like, you're supposed to think of blood and mud and like suspicious fluids you don't know the origin of. And
goo is what you're
goo. Yeah, and instead it's like
slime.
It's like shiny white paint with like someone's punched a hole through the wall. And then there's like stuff like they'll be wrestling in like the kitchen and then there's a biro on the table and it just takes you out of it. There's hand soap by the sink. There's too many elements that show someone lived here and they cared for this house that it undoes then the hole in the wall.
It does make the kind of the brave face that Bray has to put on, all the more admirable, because here's a guy who had, like, anytime you think, has he done a little extra? Yes, he has. Like, the amount of excruciating extra levels of detail on every little thing. Shout out to all the people out there who have tried to actually weave together every little tiny droplet of lore that he's given along the way and try and make it into a cohesive narrative. Because a lot of time there is this means something, and yes, Sister Abigail's actually is the link to his demonic possession that gave him extra powers at a point in time that were removed by Randy Orton by inserting the crucifix. That's a certain symbol that will undo that. But then at the same time, that if this isn't covered in all the little references and winks and nods because it's been done on such short notice, for a creative soul like Bray, this is like...
It's so frustrating because I really appreciated being able to pause this match and the notice of the tiny details. Like the buzzards, the whole thing is follow the buzzards. It's above the front door. It's in every room. If you pay attention, the buzzard logo is repeated throughout. But unfortunately, my advice to them would be, don't bother with that stuff. It's a shame, but don't bother with that stuff. Just coat the walls in mud. Because you as a viewer don't get the chance. WWE hasn't lingered on those little details. You barely see them.
It's crazy to think, though, at this point that they have Bray as this character for nearly 5 years. And I kind of look at it and kind of go, do you guys, do you know what you've got? It feels like... they want it to be simpler. They don't want it to be this complex thing. They just want it to be... Why can't you just be like The Undertaker? It was so much easier. We just have some fucking dry ice and a gong. God, it's hard. Why can't you be like Kane and just have fire? Instead, you have to have, all these other things. And they try their best, but they do inevitably end up in, an A-level doll room, for instance.
The doll room is so funny because it's again, less is more. I get what they're going for. They're trying to go for the Seven thing of there's stuff hanging from the ceiling. Oh no, the stuff is dolls. But the dolls are holding scissors. There's just too many elements, and it takes you out, and it takes it from being scary to just funny.
Yeah, when they go into the room where it's you have also watched True Detective Season 1.
Yeah, there's a shrine gimmick, literally, exactly with antlers.
I thought Matthew McConaughey was going to come in and beat up Bray Wyatt next. What I like about the match is the pacing, in as much as Randy Orton is Detective Cole Phelps from LA Noire, who walks into a room, goes, picks up a piece of an item or a gimmick, moves it around in his hand.
Maybe, but...
And then Bray hits him, and then disappears, and then we rinse and repeat for 5 or so different rooms. I will say, I think a lot of the influence of this, or a lot of the expedience of this, of we have to do a match like this, was the fact that Matt Hardy and TNA under Billy Corgan at the time were doing a lot of this stuff on a shoestring budget, and I feel like they were trying to say, hey... don't mind that. We can do it so much better in WWE. Look at and the fact that they probably spent 100 times as much money on this, with probably a tenth of the return in terms of a creatively fulfilling piece of business at the end.
It's just, at least Matt Hardy, because it was his production, he would have had more control over the environment and how it looks, because it's his home. Whereas I feel I don't know. I feel Bray was probably told, don't worry, we've got this handled. And then whoever it was who had it handled had, not really done their homework.
Yeah.
Because, the whole point of this House of Horrors match is this is where Bray lives, right? It's supposed to be a horrible, messed up slaughter home where murders maybe happened. And so then when you see the hand soap by the sink, you're thinking, wait, so this guy washes his hands? This guy uses biros? What does he write with his biro?
I need to get more swamp gas, man.
Correct painting because it's jaunty. It's one step forward and 2 steps back. And I feel so bad for Bray because I know he cares about this stuff.
Yeah, I think when Bray probably walked into the House of Horrors, it was one of those home renovation shows they do where in the UK where it's we let a kid design your house, and they come and go, oh, all right then. Look, we let WWE Creative design your House of Horrors, Bray. Oh, okay. No, it's okay, man. I don't hate it, man.
Just imagine them being no, don't worry, Bray. You won't see all of the set, okay? Just the bits that look scary. We'll just include them. We won't show the pen, but then they do show the pen a lot. It's there all the time.
I think there's a great video game in here somewhere.
Yeah,
because I think that there are some elements of Bray that are fit very well in the world of video games.
What genre?
I don't know. There's a little bit of a point and click here as Randy.
Yeah.
I'm a big sucker for the Saw video game series that were kind of a mixed genre. Hey, it was an easy platinum on my Xbox 360 back in 2008. What can I say?
I think a point and click game with quick time events.
Yes, chase elements.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think the part of your review of this from way back in the day on Patreon that I remember most is after Randy gets a fridge dumped on him, Bray goes outside and drops to his knees, and in your words, the house gets drafted from SmackDown to Raw.
It does. It goes from blue to red.
The music and the cathartic laughter at the end makes Bray seem like the hero of the piece. Like, this was very healing for him, because Randy's done such horrible, horrible things to him.
Which, again, this is so frustrating, because it's a production issue. Do they not understand the themes of the genre? You can't follow Randy into the house and then follow Bray out of it, because thematically, you've got Randy arriving at the house in his limo, right? He gets out of the door, and he goes into the house, and he has his match, and then Bray then leaves the house, goes into Randy's car, and drives away. Like, it's not a clear narrative. And it's so frustrating because on the one hand, you're like, well, okay, because they wanted Bray to win, I guess. And so that's fine because they've ended it like this. But oh no, they haven't ended it like this.
The match beyond is going to begin now.
So like, why didn't they have Randy come out at the end? Why couldn't it have been the other way around? Where I think that would make so much more sense.
A horror villain. Yeah, like he's back from the dead.
Dump the fridge on Bray Wyatt, defeating him, or so he thinks. He escapes, and then, oh no, turns out that didn't do shit. Instead, we've got like magic Randy Orton.
We cut back to huge angry boos in the arena. They fucking hate it. Like, imagine that atmosphere of seeing that on a screen in an arena you've paid like hundreds of dollars for your seat for. I literally, it brings me so much joy how like poorly executed it was in its own way. Michael Cole informs us that, in theory, Corey, this match is continuing.
Why?
And later in the show, Bray stumbles out to the ring to like very low energy boos at this point. I think this was like really the beginning of like a proper lethargy for the fans' reaction to his character.
The pacing is so bad. Like, you have the climactic moment of him escaping or whatever, and then you have him in the car, like, and there's the camera inside the car like he's on an episode of Below Deck on a night out and he's singing. And then he crawls backstage and he's walking around and he comes to the ring and he has his whole entrance. It's just, what are they what do they want you to feel as an audience member here? Genuinely, it's like they don't know.
I just think that, like, you have at the end, of course, the match ends with Randy returning
just
and
like teleporting.
He teleports in, and they're using it basically to set up a Jinder Mahal Randy Orton feud. And it's so cumbersome that like Bray is kind of like trying to ignore that the Singh brothers are there and Jinder's there. He does pick up the win at the end of the match, but like I feel a lot of their friendship, it feels like they were like forged in fire.
Yeah.
Because like there is just this kind of like a wink and a nod between these two guys of like,
well,
oh well, it's not your fault, it's not my fault.
We did our best, we had fun.
We did our best and they had fun. And like, I don't know, there's something about Randy and Bray together, like their friendship is really like, it really like warms my heart.
Yeah.
And this match is one of my very guiltiest of guilty pleasures. I don't know how you would intend to rate such a thing, given that you are obviously someone who has a degree in media, and that's like, if there was a bad zoology match happening, I'd have to give it a bad rating on the same token.
The thing is, though, because it's a horror/thriller, an element of schlock is part of that.
That's true. It's very B-movie.
It's very B-movie, and my criticisms with it are that in some ways it's not B-movie enough. I originally gave this 3 stars, and by originally I mean when it ended with Bray getting into the car.
Yes.
Because I thought that was the end of the match. I'd forgotten that it continued.
I'd ring the bell there in the car. Yeah,
even that finish I wouldn't have done that way. Flipped it, but whatever. But it was the fact that I don't mind the schlockiness. I don't mind that it's camp as fuck. I enjoyed it. It's not a boring match. It's a fun match to watch.
Yes.
It's like nothing else. So I can't give it too low a score up until that point. Him coming back afterwards and then just them having no faith whatsoever in the booking of this.
Yeah.
No faith. Just like undoing then everything that they've just done. Having Randy be the magic one. It's so shit that it took it from a 3 stars to a 1 star for
there
me.
You go.
It lost 2 stars.
Damn it, Jinder.
For basically nothing. Oh, it makes me so angry.
But I think like you could see like, you and I weren't dying the wool Bray Wyatt fans at that point. I think you could tell that, like, we were getting our enjoyment where we could at the time, but it was like, it was not the cool thing as a wrestling fan to be like, oh, Bray Wyatt's my favorite, even though, like, I think he still had a lot of, like, he had a lot of very devoted fans, a lot of young fans particular as well. But like seeing them take away all the pieces slowly, bit by bit, you know, the mystique has been taken away a little bit. You take away Harper and Rowan, they're the Bludgeon Brothers.
Yeah.
You know, you take away his family, which is kind of such a big part of like a cult leader without followers. Feels like, you know, he's rattling around there.
He wasn't even allowed to tell a story about that, because that's what I feel like. Probably what he wanted to do is tell a story about the character having lost his family.
Yeah.
And instead WWE's like, no, you have to keep doing the same thing even though it makes no sense.
I think him being paired up with Matt Hardy and them trying to kind of like
I'd forgotten that.
force it. Well, all the documentaries and stuff about Bray since have very quickly forgotten about that. But I think that was them just kind of being like, I don't know, he's like creative and wacky.
Yeah.
Just, you know, just pushing two bits. Like if you were a teacher and you were putting these two kids together, you'd be like, what are you'd be viewed as being lazy, like, you know?
Sure.
And I just think that one of the worst things to see in wrestling is to see someone's creative spark get kind of slowly snuffed out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as if kind of, there was this match and then Bray, you know, he lost his love for anything. I don't think he ever lost his love or his passion, but just seeing that light, that creative flair get dimmed down because the expectation is it's not going to work out. This is viewed and presented by WWE as him being difficult to work with.
I hate that shit
Even
so much.
in a documentary that is as much an in memorandum to him and a tribute to him, they are very quick to be like, you know, these creative artsy types,
yeah, they're
hard
very
to
stubborn,
work with.
hard to work with, egos. No, I call bullshit on
And
that.
to try and conflate his issues creatively that, because he was having a divorce. It's like, I don't think so. You know, I think, you know, that's not necessarily the cause of why your inability to both, like, and it wasn't like he was a lone figure in this. Like in 2017 to 2019 WWE, there were countless examples of people's creativity being snuffed out.
Oh yeah, it was happening all the time.
Stuff being squandered. It is easily the worst period in WWE recent history.
I think the fact that they try and make out as though he's stubborn and hard to work with, I read between the lines and I think good for him. Good for him for standing up for his creative ideas, for not just, you know, accepting the fact that they're going to do whatever they want with his creative property. Like, because it's the worst feeling in the world when you work hard on something and you're proud of it and it's good and it's potentially your legacy, and then someone else is like, oh yeah, but we want to make a penny more of money from that, so we're going to like ruin it and it's ours now.
I think the rush to do something like that and realizing that you are perhaps in the long run just devaluing it, and that's what they were. I genuinely think like it's easy to look back now and kind of go, they were at a creative low and they decided, let's roll the dice and take a risk. This creative guy, let's give him the reins once again. I think it was more likely like they knew he had infinite ideas, and there was probably a large portion of both the creative and the business side of WWE that realized that in 2019, probably the fastest route to getting something that's marketable and something that is exciting and new is probably through Bray. And that's when they approach him about this idea that he has apparently had for many, many years, and something they've been working alongside with Jason Baker, who's someone who did a lot of work in Hollywood and a lot of stuff involving special effects, horror design. You know, they were longtime friends, longtime collaborators. The idea for The Fiend was something that Bray had in one of his many, many notebooks, bursting to the brim with ideas. And it's always cool when you see like a wrestler's like kind of, you know, their notebook with all the promo ideas, but Bray's is like, it's like a teenager's book, you know, full of like drawings
it's
poetry, concept art, everything.
He is so, because it's easy to say creative and think, oh, it's just ideas, but like, no, he was like fully creative, like a great writer. He was a good artist, designer. He had so much
costume design and stuff like that.
Yeah,
as well.
He had so much say and ideas around all of the presentation.
One of the coolest things about this iteration of Bray we're going to talk about now, called The Fiend, is that many years before The Fiend was ever even a whim of an idea that you saw on screen in WWE, they did this very random thing on the website, which is like, WWE wrestlers tell you haunted Halloween stories. And, you know, people were just kind of telling spooky stories that they'd heard as a kid or whatever it was. Kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek. And Bray got to do one of them. And in this little segment that, you know, was not very well, wasn't widely distributed or widely seen. It wasn't on TV or anything. Bray talks about that when he was a young boy growing up in the swamp in Florida, he found himself wandering through the woods one day, and he felt a very evil presence there in the woods. And he described this man who had very pale skin that looked like the flesh was falling off of his face, crispy yellow-white hair that was very unearthly seeming, and he basically described that young kayfabe Bray Wyatt, the child, came into contact with a demon. The demon was basically the fiend that he was describing. Right. And it's the idea that for those people out there who want to put together a very exhaustive Reddit thread of all the lore that links together and who Sister Abigail was she his sister, was she his teacher, was she a spiritual being, all that the roots of this character, the Fiend, weren't something that Bray had dropped a little seed of, a little breadcrumb. Now, I think a lot of the breadcrumbs that Bray would drop along the years in his promos led nowhere, but the Fiend very much felt like a fully executed, fully realised idea that he had. And a lot of the inspiration came from the fact that his mother, when they were young,
so funny,
would read them Stephen King books.
So funny.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that is the last thing that my mum would ever have done in a million years. I didn't even read Stephen King books because we were sworn off them in our household.
Oh, my mum would totally have done that, I think, if I'd shown any interest. There were lots of Stephen King books lying around. In fact, I remember one time there was a family friend, their daughter came to stay with us one night, and she was like 12 or something, and I was like 5, and we had the book It on our stairs, just lying on the stairs, because I think my mum was reading at the time. She was carrying it around the house, and it was like the old classic cover with the creepy clown in the sewer with the balloon, and this girl saw that book and immediately had to go home. And me as like a 5-year-old, I was like, that seems like a normal book, I think.
Yeah, it was a book about a circus, right? So yeah, it wasn't just Goosebumps he was growing up on. He got some of the hard stuff as well. But, finding out that one of the things that Bray adored, Bray was quite like me, it felt like. Because Bo, in these interviews, he talks about how he would love Stone Cold and The Rock, whereas Bray was drawn to The Undertaker,
Papa Shango.
You're talking about, the Ultimate Warrior having the curse put on him, being this really pivotal moment in his fandom as a child. So here you find yourselves in the depths of the most creatively derelict part of WWE 2019, one of the most unique and creative and hard swings that a new character ever debuts. And not immediately, it's just, here's the Fiend. We get reintroduced to Bray Wyatt by one of my favourite things that WWE has done in years.
It's probably one of the best things they've done.
The Firefly Funhouse, which I remember just being like a glass of water in a fucking desert. Because there was some period like 2016 and early 2017, WWE felt like with their brand split, they had given, a shot in the arm or whatnot. I remember you and I went to see like Raw in 2019. And, I swear to God, I don't think the crowd made a noise the entire night we were there. It just was, felt like a very miserable time. We're on the precipice of falling off a cliff. It was very easy to see why an AEW could come around.
Oh, yeah.
When, what was being offered as the main brand was so weak. Describe the Firefly Funhouse to me, Joe.
It's a kids' TV show, which, again, we did 2 modules in my A-level, right? One was on Thriller, and the other was on Kids TV. So out there somewhere, there is my Thriller project video and my Kids TV project video. And my Kids TV project was awful, actually. But look, it does mean I am slightly qualified to make some more criticisms about the presentation of the Firefly Funhouse.
And I will say, Joe, you grew up under the auspices of 1970s classic BBC
British,
educational stuff, because you had all the tapes of all that, and you got to watch it if you were sick at home from school or whatever. That, if there's one thing, I'll give you this, England, if there's one thing you did very well, it was sternly narrated, hand-drawn and hand puppetry.
Yeah, terrifying. Kids' TV shows.
And you always learned a lesson, and that's why Mr. Ben never dressed up ever again. And that's how Fingermouse lost all his family.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you remember that bit in Thomas the Tank Engine where he gets Henry, or was it James? He gets bricked up.
Forever and ever and always.
And ever and always.
Another thing, of course, about Bray that we've mentioned a few times is that when he is inspired by something, it's not just, I'm doing this. Because I think a lot of people would have assumed, okay, you're going to do Pee-wee's Playhouse.
There is a bit of that.
But there's a bit of that. There's a bit of Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
There's a bit of I think I see Rainbow in it, classic, BBC
definitely.
stuff.
Yeah.
I see Elvira in there. Mm-hmm. There is unquestionably a huge, rich vein of Tim and Eric weirdness
Definitely.
running through all of it as well.
All of his performance as, what, is it just Bray Wyatt?
It's Bray,
Just
yeah.
Bray, nice, cuddly, but TV presenter Bray. Every drop of that character is Tim and Eric.
Yeah, and like it's this place that apparently exists in his head, and it exists there because of all the frustrations that Bray has had. He's almost kind of had to regress because of all the heartbreak that he has endured. And like for a character that had been the kind of at the tail end or the losing end of so many major feuds, one of the most exciting things about this was that unlike most heels in wrestling, when they lost, they just kind of, pretend these things didn't happen. This was a character that felt like it was rooted in all the inadequacies and all the disappointments that fans had had. He addressed the fact straight on that, Randy Orton had done all these horrible things to him, or John Cena had done all these horrible things to him, or that WWE and the fans had done all these horrible things to him. And he had all these various manifestations of the parts of his psyche through all these extremely unpleasant puppets, such as Abby the Witch. Now, I'm asking you think these various puppets represent, because there are a few interpretations of what they are.
Yeah, I know what a couple of them represent. And it's
Okay.
funny because on the surface, it seems like some of them are really deep and some of them are just like a bit like shallow. Like, for instance, like Huskus is inspired obviously by the character Husky Harris.
And let me tell you, you got big fans of Huskus the Pig in this household.
I love Huskus the Pig boy.
He's so cute.
He's so cute.
The little janky synth they play when he's on screen.
And the voice that Bray does.
Bray voices all of them,
them.
yeah.
But I think some he is given more liberties with them than others. And Huskus is like, he does like a German accent. It's like...
He's Usher from, he's a little German boy from The Simpsons, I think is who he's meant to be doing the voice of.
Okay.
Don't make me run, I'm full of chocolate. And
Yeah.
Huskus always has a big chocolate bar in his mouth.
So yeah, I know Huskus is supposed to be like a representation of how people saw him physically and kind of how he was diminished into a mocking role about his weight.
Yes, it's like a self-conscious element of him in
Yeah,
there, I guess.
he's like a nervous, little boy who's being teased all the time. Ramblin' Rabbit is inspired by how people criticized him for talking too much in the ring. It's also a manifestation of his anxieties.
I've heard people say that he's meant to represent Bray's fans who might be well-meaning but often miss the point,
Right.
But I like that you have this thing that there is kind of interpretations of or whatnot.
And then you have Mercy the Buzzard, who's the physical manifestation of a serial killer.
He's Waylon Mercy, basically.
Yeah.
Like one of the earliest Firefly Funhouse segments involves Mercy the Buzzard eating Rambling Rabbit because I don't agree with his bohemian lifestyle. You know what I mean?
So good.
And for me, who knew, I know he had said in interviews and stuff at that point that was the inspiration, all that, but even just seeing it all the way followed through here, I'm like, oh my god, the greatest strength that WWE has is always at its fingertips, and it feels like it can never just close its hand and grasp it, which is, you have this universe of characters, you want to be Disney, you want to be Marvel, you want to be all these things, and yet you're so hesitant to just be like, here's this character, they exist in this world, let's embrace it. The nerds who fucking are obsessed with this stuff like me will eat it up for days. Those who don't, this is why we're talking about a random, a blip on the career of a journeyman wrestler, Dan Spivey, who did it for a dozen matches in the mid-90s during one of the worst periods of business that wrestling ever had. And it's still here and being talked about because one creative guy wanted to make it full circle.
Yeah.
And you have... probably I would expect a lot more obvious examples than fucking Waylon Mercy.
Yeah.
But it's wild. There'll be a Waylon Mercy figure out in no time, I'm convinced, because of this stuff,
So the only one I'm not sure about is Sister Abigail.
Abby the Witch, yes.
Right.
So, it's meant to be, because Sister Abigail appears so many times in Bray's kind of story and lore,
But, I feel they were never committed to that character until Alexa Bliss came along, and then they kind of did a bit with it. But that thing with Finn Balor is the perfect example to me of Sister Abigail. Ooh, they're gonna have a Sister Abigail match. Will it be Bray wearing a veil and a dress? Oh, guess we'll never know. I just feel.
Damn you, mumps.
I don't know if there's the information out there for us to know much about that.
Look, the reality is this. the information that's out there is conflicting.
Right.
Because at one point, it's like, Bray would tell these stories about how he had a very strict upbringing and Sister Abigail was either a teacher or someone at Sunday school, or he maybe lived in an orphanage at some point. She was this controlling figure in his life who saw something in him, and that something could either be A, that he was pure evil, or B, that he was really special and that evil needs to be fostered. There's also a viewpoint that Sister Abigail might be like this quote-unquote dark passenger, this evil spirit that Bray lets himself get inhabited by. But then that became, that was the Fiend, so...
Right. I always just thought it was supposed to be his sister, which I thought was shit.
Like, literally, the entirety of his career, there were people saying, like, this girl's going to be Sister Abigail. This girl's going to be... I've heard everyone from Candice LeRae... Nikki Cross was going to be... Like, Nikki Cross... Is Nikki Cross now Sister Abigail in the Wyatt Six? Yeah. People aren't really sure about that. And I think the reality is that there is no satisfactory one answer. They want it to be vague, and it's more of a theme to be invoked.
See, I like that idea. I just wish they had committed to that. But then again, I wonder if with WWE, they're like, more on Vince McMahon being like, no, I don't understand themes. I have to see it.
I always viewed Sister Abigail and the Abby the Witch puppet as being like the manifestation of just the darkness that's inside of him.
Right.
Be it
more so than a serial killer, though.
Yeah, I think that is either going to be like that is like an actual evil spirit, or just that he has a dark, twisted side to himself.
Right.
One or the other.
I still don't understand how it's more dark than the serial killer. Though.
Yeah, I know, right? But in my mind, always I thought that Sister Abigail didn't exist. That would be the most logical thing. That Bray just lied and said, "Oh yeah, I'm like this because of this evil Sister Abigail," and she doesn't exist.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot, and that I think makes more sense.
But I think looking for reason in it is perhaps like. It's a fool's game in some respects.
I think that's why I take issue with it, is because they had the puppet made of her, and all the other puppets. The puppets are really scary.
Oh yeah, they're very unsettling in their own ways.
There's so much work gone into, especially like Mercy the Buzzard. He's so frightening.
He's fucking horrible.
So horrible. And then I love in the intro video bit where they have the theme song and everything.
Cute and cuddly.
They're cute, like clip art kind of things. But Sister Abigail isn't really scary as a puppet, and she's not really cute as an animation thing. It just feels like a cop-out having her involved.
I think it's just part of the Bray lore that has to be there, because I think that was the thing that people always grabbed onto. I guarantee you will get a dozen emails from people saying this is exactly what Sister Abigail is.
Good.
And they'll all be different, and they'll all be different as well.
Okay. Well, that's all right.
But it's like someone telling you what's the ending of Twin Peaks mean. You'll get a million interpretations. Which one sounds best to you in your opinion? That's the correct one. That's as
Mick
far as
Foley.
What? That's the Mick Foley.
Yeah,
come on.
Anything can be a main event if you dream hard enough.
That's what I'm being here. Come on. But the idea of these segments of the Firefly Funhouse is that Bray was going to present this kind of innocent version of himself that just wants to be loved, and he wants everyone just to come together in his Firefly Funhouse, because he noted, that everyone would hold up their phones, the Fireflies. He still had his believers and his followers, and all you had to do was let me in. And the little drip feed of the darkness, the restraint they had, because we had like a good half dozen of these before they were like, blah, there's the Fiend,
They had certain bits that they were trying to be creepy. Like, again, the jaunty picture frame on the wall.
What? And it's the pictures of Randy burning down the house!
There's certain themes they've missed the mark on, and I am not blaming Bray for this, because this is all production stuff. This is a case of whoever worked on this had worked in wrestling for too long, and they hadn't been able to take inspiration from enough other places. Because, like, for instance, I take huge issue with the logo.
Yeah.
The Firefly Funhouse logo is not something you would see in educational kids' TV, because it's hard to read. If for a child... No, I'm completely serious, because educational TV is supposed to help kids learn, and part of that learning would be learning how to read and write. So it would be a simple sans serif font.
That's how evil he is, Joe.
It wouldn't be curly cursive, because it's hard, especially for kids with dyslexia, it's hard for them to read.
Well, that's it, Joe. His logos is hard to interpret as his actual promos.
No, because
he's a false prophet.
It's not even like they've gone for like a creepy font. It's just a wacky one. And it's not so wacky, it's like kids' TV wacky. It's just, I don't know, it's lazy. And there's certain things with the Firefly Funhouse stuff that I find a little bit lazy. Like, I think a really good comparison for something that does this really well is Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared.
That's definitely a huge influence on it.
Huge influence, but they really nailed the educational kids TV style, like editing, set design, all those little details. Oh, it's so close, and that's why I hold it to such a high standard, is because they almost had it perfectly.
I see. I think it's perfect.
I'm glad
honestly,
you think it's perfect.
There's so many parts of it that are like so bits you wouldn't expect WWE to do at the time, and I think they're so expertly done. Like when he has there's the episode where he finally has like, hey, all the kids are here. We're having a limbo contest, and all the kids, they're not like, they're just kind of like,
They look like drugged or something. They're like really tired.
The Muscle Man dance is
so
like it is just do from Tim and Eric, but it works so perfectly well.
Yeah.
Bringing in Vince McMahon as a puppet who is literally Satan, and the fact that even all these years later they've not been like, because we were convinced, they'll edit that out surely. No, there's Vince. I'm Satan. Every time Vince appears, it goes dun dun dun, just like in real life. I absolutely adore it. And I think that it was another moment, it reminded me of like when his debut vignette started coming in NXT. It was like feeling that like, the excitement, this is different, this is new.
It's a real theme of his career, I think.
And to be able to do that multiple times.
Yeah, that breadcrumbing.
People often talk about like kind of The Undertaker being this master of reinvention. And like for sure, like he's like the Madonna of wrestling in that respect. But I would be lying to you if I said there were all these periods in Undertaker's career where the fans were like, oh God, this fucking sucks. It was more like he went away, then he would come back reinvigorated. Bray was one of the few people who could have you down in the lows of expecting nothing and then bring you up to the dizzying highs of anticipation.
Also, I feel it's not fair to compare The Undertaker to like Madonna or David Bowie or whoever, because it wasn't ever his creation. It was just doing what he was told. He's like a soldier.
He's the power of the creative force behind him. Yeah.
Bray is the one reinventing himself again and again and again.
But it's very obvious straight away that like with the Fiend character, they had immediately struck gold with one of, if not the most visually striking character of the last 10 years that WWE had. Like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, anything that happens from now, it doesn't really matter, because it was like, as soon as they showed a glimpse of him in the Funhouse, I'm like, this thing is money. They're got like figures, t-shirts, masks. Like, Tom Savini designed the face mask for it. It is, I think, an absolute masterpiece.
It makes me so uncomfortable.
Like, I'm not a horror head at all. Like, I'm actually pretty squeamish for gory things and things like that. Even though I love Tom Savini and I respect your work in Dawn of the Dead, one of my all-time favorite movies. But The Fiend is so unpleasant to look at, and
it looks like uncomfortable for him to wear as well. Like, it pulls his eyes sideways and it makes his eyes bulge out, and really just like it makes me think of like a bloated corpse. It's so upsetting.
With the Fiends, though, early on, it became apparent, like, you're gonna have to, the bell's gonna have to ring. Like, there was that part of me that, as much as the anticipation was building, it's like, what are they going to do? Because they are going so hard now, not just kind of alluding to, oh, he's kind of got some creepy, they're like literally saying he is the embodiment of horror. He is this absolute evil to look at, impossible to interpret, devastatingly evil entity. But the bell's gonna have to ring, right? And I remember thinking, like, all right, it doesn't matter if it goes badly, because it's so iconic. Like, I think Bray has justified his payday from making something that they can sell toys of forever. Like, I do literally remember seeing like people with like at wrestling shows, Fiend masks, kids, like once kids are dressing up as you.
I know.
Like, who was dressing up as any of the wrestlers before that other than John Cena? Like, it was like when I saw it at the house show I was at last year, loads of kids dressed up as Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso. I'm like, we're back. Like, wrestling has got huge cachet now because people are dressing up and youngsters are wanting to dress up as them. The first match he had was against Finn Balor at SummerSlam.
Oh, Finn did such a good job.
And like, Finn, as a lad who, I think at that time, you could probably listen to our review of it on the Patreon, and we were like, I think Finn was a guy, there was a bit of frustration of, when's he going to have his big moment? But realizing how good a job he did at selling it, the audience gasped through it. It's only like a 9-minute match or whatever. They gasped their way through it because Finn sells it like he is in the ring with an actual demon. Which is easier said than done, I guess. Because I don't know if you remember the reaction to the Hell in the Cell match with Seth Rollins and The Fiend and the red light, and there was sledgehammer shots and Fiend no-selling all the offense, and the fans, they lost the fans in the course of the match, and the reaction online was, I don't know, I guess for me and for a lot of fans, it exposed a lot of the potential shortcomings of having a guy who was invulnerable, is that fair to say?
Yeah, but then I always found it frustrating from the other end of this as a fan, because, like, I agree there are limitations to having a character who just wins all the time, but that's only The Fiend. And what I thought was so clever about Bray's idea was that it's not just The Fiend only comes out sometimes.
Yes.
And it's Bray Wyatt who has to face the repercussions otherwise. And he's like, you know, his character at this point loses a lot. And I thought that was something they never really played into as much as they could have done.
I think there was like one match he did with The Miz where he wrestled as Firefly Funhouse Bray, and he was like a complete pacifist, you know, just like a pushover in the ring or whatever. And you know, it's something I love so much when someone can play a dual role in a wrestling match.
But I think I think it's a WWE issue. I think they presented this the wrong way round. They presented it as The Fiend, who turned into Bray Wyatt sometimes, and what they should have done was had Bray Wyatt, who's the underdog, who's losing, but maybe, just maybe, someday he'll give in to that dark passenger, and then The Fiend could come out.
It's funny that you could do it like how they probably did Finn and the Demon originally, which is for the very big moments or matches, perhaps you would see him, but I think that was the default.
You could have good guy Bray Wyatt in a way being like, I don't want to let him in. I don't want to let him take over myself.
Or you'll regret if you attack me or whatever.
Because I pride myself on being a good person, and he is not a good person.
I like that they gave him the championship. I certainly thought that was very exciting.
Horrible
with the most horrible face in the world. But like the idea, like I think always the strength we talked about in the way back in the Ric Flair episode of like there being a beatable heel champion, and if you have this guy who is kind of like this cuddly joke carrying a world championship, you think conceivably someone like The Miz could even beat him, but maybe in that 1 in 10 chance he turns into this other character, maybe you don't want to push the buttons in the wrong way or whatnot. I think if you had then built up to the title matches it was perhaps a bit too complex for where they were going, because 1 minute you have The Fiend being literally invulnerable in a match and like no selling everything, and then you have, you know, him losing to Goldberg in 3 minutes in Saudi Arabia type of a thing. There was very clearly a bunch of wrestlers who could get it.
Yes, you can tell just by looking at kind of his match listings. The people who got it generally got to work with him a lot more.
I think the case of Daniel Bryan versus The Fiend.
Yeah.
And I know Bryan had incredible matches with Bray in the earlier part of Bray's main roster career. I think he had absolutely some of the matches of his career there. But seeing Bryan and Bray, they wrestled a strap match at probably a very forgotten, it's Rumble 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And I think that was an example of like, hey, you know, maybe you just need to think this through a little bit more and maybe overthink it like a Bryan Danielson would, because they made a bit of magic in that match, I thought. And Bray being able to convey not necessarily a vulnerability, but like kind of a susceptibility with someone like Bryan who would kick him relentlessly in the face, or in that match he kicks him relentlessly in the balls or whatever it was. You could tell, like with the likes of Seth Rollins and whatnot, and Braun Strowman, etc., that there was a frustration of like, how do I work around this?
Yes.
And I think that, like, if you treat wrestling like play or improv, if someone is going in being like, what the fuck am I going to... You're never going to make a great match with someone going in going, what the fuck am I going to do?
I blame backstage WWE for that, because I just guarantee people like Triple H were like, well, he's being hard to work with, isn't he? He's not being generous as a performer. And it's like, well, actually, maybe he's being a bit protective about the character he has spent a lot of time thinking about, as opposed to you guys who have spent no time thinking about it.
The introduction of Alexa Bliss into it, I
hated
that personally.
I'm so sorry. Look, anyone listening, if you wanted us of all people to be like, oh, and now the amazing bit about Alexa Bliss, it's just not going to come from us.
I love Alexa as a wrestler, and like multitude different variations of her character I think are really, really good. I love what she's doing currently, and you know, we're in August 2025. I think her and Charlotte is a really entertaining thing, but since NXT, you and I were big fans of hers. I can't pretend that this wasn't, like, I know they found it fun to work together.
And I know people love it
and
as well.
she views it as to be one of the most creatively fulfilling parts of her career. I just never liked the weird
Infantilizing
stuff.
Yeah. I'm a little girl. I'm on a swing. Okay.
The pandemic coming around shortly, I mean, within 6 months of the Fiend character debuting, all of a sudden there is no audience, there is no stadiums to be filled with rabid wrestling fans. It was, I think, in many ways, an ultimate opportunity for Bray, and particularly for this version of Bray with the Firefly Funhouse character, to show kind of what he was capable of doing. Because he's pegged to wrestle John Cena that year's WrestleMania. And all of a sudden, I think it was literally 1 week after them announcing the match, there is no WrestleMania to speak of. And it's also a WrestleMania that is confirmed to be 2 nights for the first time. I think this next match that we're going to talk about, an absolute all-time bit of business, which is the Firefly Funhouse match from WrestleMania 36, night number 2, John Cena versus Bray Wyatt, which came together in a short amount of time as the House of Horrors match.
Really?
They had literally 2 days. I think they actually filmed it in 1.
Wow.
But it was like one day they sat around at a conference room table at the Performance Center going, what have we got? What can we do?
I cannot imagine. I just can't believe they did it in such a short amount of time. It's so good.
This was a match which I think spellbound and captivated us at a time where I think our hearts were in our mouths in terms of, not only are we going to be wrestling fans anymore?
No, genuinely. Yeah.
I was, at the end of night 1 of WrestleMania, with the exception of the Boneyard match, genuinely thinking, will there be anyone left who wants to learn about wrestling?
Yeah.
Will How To Wrestling even need to exist in this pandemic world?
I was genuinely, really struggling as a wrestling fan just before this time period. I'd quit my job working at a bank to do podcasting kind of full time and spend a lot of my time watching wrestling. And I just wasn't enjoying it the way I used to. It
was a pretty dark period, creatively speaking,
yeah.
for WWE in particular.
It was really dark. And for me as well, I wasn't enjoying watching wrestling at that point. I feel like it's hard because you have to be a fan to do this. And I wasn't feeling much like a fan. And genuinely, this match completely changed everything for me. It was suddenly I was like, wait, wrestling's the fucking best thing ever.
This match came after the 43-minute Randy Orton Edge match, which was so boring. I genuinely was like, I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch wrestling anymore. So the idea of this match is essentially a cathartic revenge tour that takes place inside Bray's mind. Because John's music hits, he comes out, realizes not only is he not at WrestleMania, he's not even in our plane of existence. He has somehow accidentally entered Bray Wyatt's mind palace.
We have to talk about the setup for this as well, because going into this feud, John Cena was doing what would seem to be his kind of final farewell tour, like he's doing now, but it was years ago.
This was the point where he was knowing that wrestling had been kind of the full focus.
Yeah, and now
acting was going to be the full focus. So he was saying, I am basically on my way out. Don't expect me to be around.
Yeah, he was doing promos saying, I think this year WrestleMania should go on without John Cena, and everyone was getting very sad by that. And then the Fiend comes out and he points at the WrestleMania sign, and John's like, well, okay. And then they have a match. But what I loved is John is kind of teetering on turning heel here a little bit. The stuff he's saying about Bray is horrible.
Yeah, he gets quite harsh. It's like
so harsh.
All the things that the worst fans, the most bad faith takes about Bray, where it's like, how many chances is this guy going to get? He always disappoints. He's so privileged. He gets so many opportunities. He gets so much focus put on him, and he's never really given us anything of note or of merit.
And then he says, Bray Wyatt is not the future of wrestling, and John was going to literally end the existence of Bray Wyatt. And what I find so cool, because it's savage, that shit he's saying. He's saying all that horrible stuff about him and then saying, I'm going to get rid of him, basically, from wrestling. And what happens throughout this match is basically everything John says about Bray happens to John.
Yes.
Bray is just a mirror at this point.
And Bray uses his powers of mind games and persuasion to deconstruct everything that John believes he stands for.
Yeah.
It is in essence, this is what I love about this match. You can listen to our review of it from back in the day, which is right at the start of the pandemic, where we may have gone actually crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But we got in deep in the weeds, and there's so many weeds to get deep into here. But what Bray does in this is basically what you would do if you were going to try and brainwash someone and get them to join a cult. He takes everything you stand for, he makes you yourself deconstruct it, and then gives you the tools with which to build a new version of yourself that you then hate.
Yeah.
And now you're under my control, essentially.
And it's just the fact that everything John says about Bray, you know, oh, you've been given opportunity after opportunity. Everything you do, you're supposed to be like the big name. It's all stuff that applies to John. And Bray doesn't have to say that. Normally in wrestling, you'd get a scathing promo who's like, actually, John, I think you'll find that everything you just said applies to you.
Yeah, I like that it is one of the more, legible puzzle boxes of Bray Wyatt's career, in that, you know, you can watch it and just kind of let it wash over you and all that, for sure. But
and it's fun.
It is super fun, and there's loads of, like, references and fun bits. They take full advantage of the fact that they've got access to, you know, the archives, and, you know, they use loads of props and things from the past to kind of make it feel more than an underwhelming WrestleMania that no one wants during the start of a pandemic in front of no fans. Honestly, it stands on its own 2 feet above and beyond those constraints. But, like, he literally sets it up by saying, who are we and why do we do the things that we do? So you are given that very strong clue straight away that this John Cena, maybe you're not going to miss him so bad. Because this is coming at a point where, you know, John Cena had so much ill will for so long, and then he had that, like, period from 2016 onwards where he really revitalized himself. He made fans kind of basically unexpectedly turn back on their own criticisms and, like, you know, love him for all the opportunities he was giving young wrestlers and all the great matches he was putting on and the dynamic range of types of matches he was doing, all the opposite of the things that, you know, people hated him for. And Bray was here to remind you why you hated him in the first place.
So yeah, we start the match off with John making his entrance, and then he's kind of like, because it's in the pandemic and there's no one there, he's like, oh, well, this is kind of awkward, waka waka, I guess, welcome to WrestleMania. And then they cut to archival footage of Vince and Mean Gene, Howard Finkel, all saying, welcome to WrestleMania. Like, the editing is so good in this little video package. Like, massive props to whoever did the editing on this in short notice as well.
Yeah, John has to journey through all the kind of early phases of his career. Bray takes on the kind of the persona of whoever it is that he would have been in the ring of. So he starts off by being Kurt Angle, who throws out the original open challenge that brought John Cena onto the TV screens.
But I love that the way they introduce all of that is by John teleporting into the funhouse, where Ramblin' Rabbit is like, you have to go through that door. And kind of like Alice in Wonderland, like follow the rabbit type thing. And he goes through the door, and that's where we suddenly cut to this like black void where he's like trapped in his own past. Where, as you say, we just go through stages and stages of like his biggest fails. And also a lot of influences that would have formed the foundation for a character like John Cena. Like, because we don't just have his first, you know, we have the prototype, his debut match against Kurt Angle, which shows, you know, this is like his first failure. But then we cut back to Saturday night's main event, and we see the context then of him like working out loads,
becoming the version of who he needs to be, because you see a lot of Vince McMahon and the evil demon puppet and commentary of like who he needs to be Vince McMahon's favorite, and that his body, his status as a muscle guy is going to be the thing that kind of gets him to the main event. And that's what happens, you know. Johnny Large Meat was what John Cena had to become.
One of the things that Bray says to him during this period is, it's all about having muscles. It doesn't matter what talent you have.
John Cena cursed Giraffe in the early Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick, which is, you know, Bray sells it just like as a disappointed parent hearing their child swear for the first time.
It's kind of cool because you've got John just doing his rap. Like earlier on when he was in his prototype era, he could only say ruthless aggression because he's like trapped in this mind palace of just ruthless aggression. And in this era of his character, he can only speak in like cringe rap lines that rhyme.
Crude rhymes.
And so he gets given his opportunity by Bray to kind of do his diss tracks. And then you have Bray cutting an eloquent promo, as he often does. And then he hands the mic back over to John. And again, all John can do is like disses that rhyme.
Yeah, he can only rhyme nuts with nuts. Like,
Yeah.
come on, man.
You can do better.
He just tells him, look, all you do is you pick on people. You're a bully and people cheer for you irrespective of what you do. You're not a hero. You know, that is something that like quite was like not just part of like what John's character represented, but like a lot of the heroes of WWE. Like I grew up with like The Rock being the biggest bully in the world, was being like, yay! And I think it was like a very on the nose piece of deconstructionism there, so to speak.
And then they start waltzing. And then Bray becomes cult leader Bray, again, like original Bray Wyatt. And he gets on his knees and suddenly John Cena's holding a chair. And Bray says to John, 6 years ago, you made the wrong choice.
He's calling back to that match at WrestleMania.
Yeah, where John considered turning heel, right?
And he didn't do it. And Bray basically says that's the moment where like all my potential and my momentum was squandered. He thought that he could either win the match or cause John to change forever. He could make an impact, and instead John took it all away by proving him wrong, essentially.
And so Bray says, fix it. So John goes to swing the chair. Thus, in this canon now, he's turned heel. But Bray teleports away, and instead now we go to like...
It's Nitro, baby!
Nitro, yeah. And
we go through Kevin's nightly ritual, watching a bit of WCW. Yes, please.
Bray Wyatt is Eric Bischoff, and he cuts all the classic Bischoff promos.
You people.
And so because in this canon now, John Cena is a heel, he's also in the NWO. So we get like cringe NWO John Cena. It cuts to Vince McMahon, the puppet, saying, this is good shit.
Yeah, basically telling you... It's not just like kind of tearing down... the kind of the John Cena character. It's also like what do you fans actually want? Because very often in wrestling, when fans are given directly what they want, it doesn't work out that way. You know, we are in an era currently where the fans are constantly being given what they want over and over, and I think that it is perhaps going against the old notion that Vince McMahon always had, which is you had to maybe subvert that in some way, because if you give people what they want, it's the end of the world suddenly. But in the case of John Cena being heel, I think they are quite adamant in letting you know. I mean, all I can say is John Cena being heel isn't working out so hot, creatively speaking, at the moment.
And it doesn't work in this reality either, because John Cena, heel John Cena, goes to attack Bray Wyatt, and he's beating the shit out of Bray, only for him to realise that he's beating the shit out of Huskus the Pig Boy, this tiny, limp puppet.
Which, by the way, you can't get that puppet.
That sucks.
And I talked earlier about The Fiend and it being this like gold mine for them and a big marketing machine behind it. How is there not a alright, maybe you don't make the really scary buzzard.
Oh, you've got to make the buzzard. I like the buzzard.
You can get a little tiny Huskus that comes with one of the Elite Bray figures, but I want a full-size Huskus. I want to feed it chocolate.
And then we've got the bits which are very like Twin Peaks, very Firewalk with me. Because we hear a quote from John Cena, the same quote which he said at the start of this feud, where he says, "This match will end the existence of the most overhyped, overvalued wrestler in the existence of wrestling history." And John, who is lying on the ring mat having been beaten up by Bray, vanishes. He just disappears.
I love that Bray counts the 3 count as well. Like it's so twisted. It's such a bad ending.
Yeah.
What I love about this match is that in 2K24, the wrestling game before the most recent one as of time of recording, they had this entire match playable, and he played through all the individual bits as all the different versions of John, the different versions of Bray. And it kind of feels like this spoke to where Bray's strengths really probably lied, which was not in traditional wrestling. And I think this is one of the things that people hold up as being like one of Bray's masterpieces. And the fact that it took a global pandemic and a shortage of time and a shortage of resources, this was perhaps in many ways, when you are trying to do something creative, you're being taken, all your tools are away from you. You haven't got fans.
No.
You have to do a wrestling thing without fans. It's like...
It seems impossible.
And yet, out of this most cursed set of circumstances, they made one of the most enduring... I love this match.
Me too.
So fucking much. It's great. We got so many messages from people saying that this match got their friends into wrestling. which is wild to me because it all downhill from here, baby, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it showed you that Bray didn't just need more budget, more time, more hands on deck. Maybe actually the fact that there was just two creative wrestlers who had some means at their disposal and a bit of urgency, they made magic.
I think as well, a massive part of this is that WWE at this point seems to have faith in him pulling this off. And maybe, I don't know if it's because it's during COVID and lockdown, or if it's because of John Cena's involvement, but it's the fact that, like, you know, I'd say the end of this match shows such a perfect stark difference between the House of Horrors match and this match. Because the House of Horrors match, after, you know, the bit with the cinematic bit, they cut to Michael Cole and JBL and they're like, well, looks like the match will continue beyond now, blah, 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 blah. And they just look kind of like normal guys. The end of this match cuts to Titus O'Neil, speechless, scratching his head, looking really uncomfortable, going, I don't know what I just saw. And that's all they say. They never refer to it again.
Fantastic.
It's perfect. It's so good.
I can assume the star rating for this one, Joe.
If I did do Beyond the Scale, I would. Are
you going to Meltzer it?
No, I'm not going to Meltzer it. It's a 5 out of 5. It's perfect. I feel in some ways uncomfortable giving it a rating at all because it's a match, but it's not a match.
I think what it boils down to and why it's so successful is that if you look at the House of Horrors, there was probably more hands on deck in many respects that were involved in that. But they were all being put, like, you know, you're putting on a live show, you have to do this, you've got live TV going out, there's so many things going on, whereas so much of the focus on this was just, let's make something interesting. What are your ideas? And let's work.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see what this match would have been like if they did go ahead and had an audience. It probably would have been a fairly basic fare. It probably would have been The Fiend just squashing John Cena and a few puppets appeared in the crowd or whatever it was. But genuinely, it makes me think, like, is there a whiteboard out there that has a million other ideas they didn't do? Or was this just actually all the ideas they had all thrown at the wall and it happened to stick? But man, they pulled it off. And I always thought at the time, like, Kevin, you've gone crazy. It's the pandemic. You'll stop being crazy. Proper wrestling will come back. And then this match will seem like a weird thing that you liked back then. But actually, I think I like it even more now because
me too.
I know that I have all that. Because this set a tone and a standard for a cinematic type of match that WWE tried so many times. Even Bray himself, he did swamp fights with Braun and all that. They never came close to this again.
For me, what I value so much about this match is something that I think the WWE never learned, because they try in the documentary after this match to tell the story of, oh, well, with The Fiend, there was this issue of, what does it happen? Eventually he's got to, he's got to have a match, and it doesn't make sense, and blah, blah, blah.
But they had good matches.
They did it here. It's not really a match. Yeah. He pulled it off. It's amazing character work.
They pulled it off with Bryan and Finn as well in a regular wrestling match also. So
it just shows you have to be creative. You can't just think in normal terms with this character specifically. And I think it really encouraged them, at least in a few of these instances, to think outside the box. And I think so much of wrestling, I look, over the years, in-ring wrestling, technical stuff especially, I value it so much more than I used to.
Yeah.
But I would be the first to say that that's not all wrestling is. Character work and creativity is just as important for this style of wrestling. Absolutely. Where you are going a bit more gimmicky and a bit more catering to the mainstream.
Well, it's just the case that, they had a golden goose, but it turns out you had to kind of coax it a little bit to lay those eggs. It wasn't like, it was a money-making machine, this Fiend idea, but it wasn't a simple, turnkey mechanism like a Hogan or an Austin or whatever it was. It was a lot harder to kind of, to work it out. And I think the pandemic presented as many kind of constraints as it did opportunities for that character in particular. Like, he had the belt on him a lot of the time during that pandemic era because it felt like they could rely on a lot of this type of a thing. I think going back to, Randy Orton again and coming at him with things like, Black Goo and the Inferno match.
The Inferno match is such a perfect example of them not having faith, I think, and also having too much creative sway over something they didn't care about that much.
This felt like you had a year of The Fiend at this point, because this happened, I think, around, it would have been the start of 2021 or thereabouts. You'd had a year of The Fiend, and now you wanted a new Fiend action figure.
Yeah.
So the idea was to set him on fire. And this is another one of these matches that we put on when like we want a laugh, because the Randy Orton...
It's so stupid.
Randy Orton versus Alexa Bliss and Randy Orton versus The Fiend in Inferno match are insane matches. The Inferno match, which ends with The Fiend being set on fire and then re-emerging later in one of the ugliest, most cumbersome outfits. And this documentary they put out, where, by the way, I will point out for the record, John Hubert passed away just around this point, which for me it was such a chilling moment, because that's when it really felt like, at least in the world of wrestling, that like, and it wasn't just a COVID thing, obviously, but it felt like there was kind of a precariousness of life, I guess, for like, because a lot of people knew friends and family who were going into hospital and maybe not coming out, and John Hubert slipping away in the manner that he did, it just reminded people of what was around them during that period.
Yeah.
So that's a tough fucking go of it for him at that point in time. His best friend in the world dying in such a fucking hard to accept way. And then he's fucking under all this fucking shit.
And the way they...
he was,
the documentary,
you know, those creative types, man. Those
hard to work
artists.
with. They have their own ideas about what they should do, like not wrestling under a ton of shit. There's literally a clip where they have an interview with Triple H. He's like, well, he became increasingly hard to work with. And they literally cut to Bray Wyatt.
I can't breathe.
I've got so much fucking shit on me. Like, I think you should leave.
Yeah, I know.
How? He could barely breathe. How do you expect him... As well, like COVID, assuming a lot of wrestlers probably caught COVID at this time because of the nature of travel and the job and stuff like that. It's in your lungs. It's a pulmonary disease, right? Like it interacts with your ability to breathe properly.
He actually got burnt for real when they did the Inferno match. Like he did actually receive actual burns. So being underneath that heavy suit while he was dealing with and healing from actual burns,
all that hot plastic on you would be
it's mad. And look, here's the thing: is that. It does feel like one of those kind of give it inch, she'll take a mile thing, because that Fiend mask looked hard to work in. And when we watched that strap match with Bryan, we were both amazed at his ability to convey emotion, to like with that constraint of that horrible tight mask on him, to the eye work and all the reactions, the way he could make those horrible noises. He made it work, even though for most people it would have been like, I'm sorry, I can't work like this. And they took it so far the other way.
Far, and he already had to adapt so much to make it work. And then for them to just be like, oh, he's being very hard to work with at the moment because he can't fucking move in that suit. What do you want from him? Like, he's not going to be able to wrestle like classic Bray Wyatt under 2 tons of makeup and plastic and costuming. Like, stop being stupid.
They like almost immediately try and retcon their way out of it. That the following WrestleMania, they just have him get magicked back to normal Fiend.
Boo.
Then Alexa turns on him with a crown of goo. Fans hated it. Randy beat him, and it was not what anyone wanted. It just felt like you had such a creative thing in your hand, and you kind of think you crushed it really. There were plenty of signs along the way that you shouldn't be doing that.
Just no faith. Like, you cannot tell me. I refuse to believe that Bray didn't have an idea for how to undo the burn. I'm sure he had like pages of ideas of how to do it in a creatively fulfilling way that made sense for the character. WB just like, no, we don't want to.
He's one of those guys who doesn't need to wrestle to have the impact.
No.
As great as he is at wrestling, there were so many things they could have done. And when he got released... Absolutely, I could not believe.
It was like within a year of John dying or something as well.
It's when they released Braun Strowman as well. They really I don't know. It was one of those moments where I think any notion I ever had about WWE, kind of like, oh yeah, we're like a family or that kind of thing. It was like right, they were gearing up to be as profitable as possible because they knew they were going to be selling themselves, and everything that had even the remotest excess in their minds in terms of value. Like, I will say, and I've said many, many times, if you look at the general cut of pay that athletes, that professional fighters, that actors, and anyone who's involved in any kind of creative or physical endeavor, what WWE talent get, even though it's much, much better now, historically, and still is absurd compared to their profits.
Yep.
And it was so difficult to swallow that pill of someone who had made you during a really tough time for them, where they weren't getting your revenue is down, you're not getting people into the arenas anymore. That's difficult. I get that, but like, if there was one person who was moving merchandise during that pandemic era, it was him. And they were still selling those toys when he was released, and I think that was kind of a heartbreaker for a lot of fans. And he kind of went radio silent for a long time, and I think that was something that was quite difficult for us to kind of accept, because it was one of those things that you assume with a wrestler who has all these creative ideas, you get released, we'll be like, right, bam, here I am, here's my new project. And there was like rumblings that he was doing like some horror movie stuff. And there was some rumblings, I think him and Bo like were going to do like a reality show or something like that.
Yeah, they filmed a TV pilot for a reality show where they would hunt cryptids, which is such a good idea, and I wish it was available online somewhere. They did have some footage of it for this documentary, but I just think that's so much fun. I'm sad that didn't go ahead.
He immersed himself in a lot of artwork at that point in time as well.
As in creating art, painting, that sort of thing.
One of those like, fuck it, I'm just going to go and start painting and creating stuff and see where I go. He's like got like warehouses full of paintings and whatnot. So like, I think he did find other outlets. And I think something that was very nice to see is that someone who's creative and they're in wrestling, if their only creative outlet is the wrestling, that like it feels like it ends in heartbreak so many times, because it's such a difficult medium to express oneself creatively, particularly in a WWE environment where it's also regimented and they have so many set goals and whatnot. So the fact that he had all these other creative outlets in that time, when I think most of us were fearing that he was in the depths of misery or whatnot, that was at least comforting, I think, to know that he had these other outlets, and he realized that he had values and talents that lay beyond just what WWE could offer him. I know that at the point in time, like in 2022, we were like, will he go to AEW? What would that look like?
Yeah,
because I ranked him so much as an in-ring performer, but I always thought that that at that point people were expecting big cinematic stuff from him. So there's lots of tumult that goes on behind the scenes in WWE. Other owners, let's just say, other creative forces taking the helm. And one of the first things that Triple H gets involved with when he takes the reins in a creative, full-time manner for WWE is seeing about bringing back Bray Wyatt, who had been training with Natalya and TJ at their dungeon, getting into better shape. Ideas are percolating. He's even approaching Bo Dallas about like, hey, maybe we get back in and do this thing together. And them coming back in as a unit together and having all these ideas that they're just shooting around, and then WWE seemingly being very open to them, because obviously with Nick Khan and Triple H and the new owners and whatnot, there's more avenues, they think, for getting creative and bringing in a director of long-term creative to do something that you feel like the Bray Wyatt of 2013, his mind would have exploded when you find out. Like,
and he worked for Marvel.
I know, right? Like, the follow the rabbit, the teases, the stuff they did.
So clever. Genuinely, I think it's like the best marketing they've ever done.
So fucking good.
They did QR codes on like the microphone when Triple H would cut a promo about this is the new era, blah, blah, blah.
If someone in the crowd walked by with one of them, you know,
yeah. They would show coordinates on the screen, and all of these things would link to, again, beautifully animated,
little
like
games,
pixel art games of a rabbit jumping into a hole.
You did your like thesis for university on this. What would you call this? Like mixed media marketing, or what would you?
Well, mine was on. I think you could come under this umbrella. Was on social media marketing in film and television, using basically social media in innovative ways. So not just using like a Twitter account to go, hey, we've got a movie coming out, watch it, which is what most marketing is.
My character has a Twitter account.
Yeah, this is the idea instead that people will share things because they want to have it on their profile. They want to talk about it rather than you expect people to do your advertising for you.
And kudos to him as well, because I thought like in 2022, I'm like, this is all done. Like, no one, like, this is well and truly done. Like, that type of marketing, that era of it being unique and creative, like that's surely passé at this point. And they, to their credit, just because of the quality of how they did it and how I think they tapped into that the fan base that wanted to do this were also the fan base who were like feeling that really Bray Wyatt should come back. And they were also the fan base that were excited about maybe a change in creative direction for the company that had really sorely been in need of that for a long time. So I think it was some very smart business on their end that all these things came together, because the people who wanted to believe this was just solely a business thing, yeah, sure, it's a business thing. They're promoting Extreme Rules. the people who thought this was Bray Wyatt's creative vision being vindicated, they were just as happy as well. And there was a nice alliance of wrestling fans coming together and being genuinely excited to see someone come back and get to do what their vision was of wrestling.
Yeah.
What that vision involved, I don't think we'll ever really get to see, because I think we caught, at best, glimpses and patches of it.
Yeah.
Like, we saw Uncle Howdy appear here and there. There was a little feud with Bray Wyatt. I think he actually had maybe one match upon his return, which is the Lights Out match that it felt like everyone in wrestling land except Kevin and Joe on our Patreon page, we loved it. Everyone else hated the bejesus out of it. But we were like, what did you expect? This is what you want, right? This is like, life-size puppets and crazy. Uncle Howdy jumped through a table and exploded. Like, how are you not entertained by this?
It was, for me, and I think us in general, it was the fact that, look, if WWE are going to do these bullshit marketing matches, where the point of the match isn't really to have a great match, it's to advertise a product, then this is the right type of character to do that with. Not Rey Mysterio and Dominic in a father versus son match where you've got, hello kids, I'm a cereal bar, or whatever. Like, that's not how to do it, and this is how to do it. But yeah, people hated that match.
I think, honestly, even though it was such a small little portion of his career, some of my favorite stuff that Bray did is during this period. I think his actual return at the Extreme Rules event, where you had all the grown-up puppets in the audience, incredible. The promo he did, where he just spoke from the heart, it could make me cry.
It did make me cry. Yeah.
The new music is. I will say, folks, that music, proceed with caution.
Yeah.
It will make Joe cry.
It will.
It was very perfectly done, and it felt like we were just on the cusp of something, and then like, as soon as it felt like it was starting to get going, it's like, actually, no, we're not going to yet. And what was it? Just them taking their time? What was it? And then you find out, actually, there's maybe some health issues, but we're being very covert about it.
Yeah.
And when he passed away, it came so out of the blue.
Yeah, literally everyone was ready. We were all, as far as we were concerned, it was like, oh, he's going to come back soon.
I had heard there was creative differences, or he had bouts of depression or something like that, and then it was like, oh no, he's got COVID, and then it turned out afterwards, actually, there was this underlying heart problem, and he had been exacerbated by COVID, and his attempts to train and come back, I think there was a lot of strain that was being put on him, and he was, at moments he'd be on the mend, and then the progress would stall. And I think I understand, even though I feel like we live in an era now where when wrestlers get hurt or injured, we find out very, very little compared to 10 years ago. We found out quite a lot. In the case of a guy with a heart issue, he was kind of getting better, and then the progress was going backwards and then going forwards. You'd be playing with people's emotions fast and loose if you're like, he's getting better. Oh no, he's getting worse. So I understand the radio silence to an extent, even though I didn't like it.
No, I think in hindsight, I think they handled it quite well, actually, because I think with something like a heart defect, I think it was, it's not something that you can just come out and be like, right, this is what this is. It's more complicated than that. And I think you have to bear in mind that you're often trying to communicate these things to a lay person. And this is a complicated thing where people might assume, oh, he's had a heart attack or something. And that's not what had happened. He actually, he was struggling with his health. He was told specifically by his cardiologist to do light cardio only. Do not work out more than necessary. So that was already at odds with how WWE was hoping to bring him back.
Well, they were hyping like he was going to have a match with Brock Lesnar.
And he's going to have a six-pack now and all this shit. And that's completely unrealistic. But the truth is it's not a clear case of he was really sick. And it's not a clear case of he was going to get better immediately, because the truth is, he was sick, but it was one of those defects which, if it had been managed, correctly, which it was to be clear, like, the doctors did everything right. The issue was, it was just a bad luck. He wasn't wearing the vest.
Yeah, he was given a kind of a special shock vest that basically, if his heart went into defib or anything like that, it would shock him. It would shock him.
And the idea was is that he would be fitted with a pacemaker. Now, that's the thing that I feel is like, that's kind of really hard to get our heads around as fans, because we looked this up and there's not really cases of wrestlers wrestling once they've got that.
Yeah, with a pacemaker that I could find was Ric Flair wrestling in his last match.
And I don't think he'd be cleared to wrestle in WWE.
I had seen I'd seen some, forum posts and stuff like that where there was like, literally medical professionals talking about, having a pacemaker in wrestling, and be like, no, like,
Yeah.
you
But then
you
again-
could, but you would absolutely not in a WWE where they won't clear you. And
Right. That's it. And I feel, again, it's one of those things where medical professionals will always err on the side of caution. There have been so many... I mean, think of Rey Mysterio. There have been so many surgeons who told him, you will never wrestle again. Do not wrestle again, you will die. Wrestlers are physical freaks. They can wrestle under a lot of weird physical conditions.
Yeah.
But that's why, again, I feel it's like... It's not right for us as fans to be given that information when we don't understand it and we're not qualified to understand it. And it's also not our fucking decision.
Yeah. It led to like speculation and kind of people being kind of uncomfortable with not knowing. And, I think when there's an absence of information, that is kind of inevitable. I don't think anyone meant ill by it. It's the part of it that just really upsets me, really to my core, which is when he did pass... He went and he had a nap after picking up his kids at school, never woke up from it. They found the vest in his car. He wasn't wearing it. If he was wearing the vest, he'd still be alive.
Yeah.
And there are so many cases of tragic passings in wrestling where, there isn't a, if he had only been doing this. Because, if they had only not had, a lifetime of... physical abuse to their head or, had all these, drug issues. It's never a simple thing, but it's literally like, if he was wearing that fucking vest, he'd be alive. He probably wouldn't be wrestling, but he'd be alive.
Yeah.
And that, you're listening to the sounds of a man who's still trying to process this in real time these few years later, and I don't know if I ever will. And I wish to God I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know.
I wish to God I didn't.
But I think it's
it's public information. It was out there. It's just, fuck me,
I think it's easy,
I can't,
though,
oh my God.
as someone who hasn't had to do that, like, okay, if you think of someone with, like, sleep apnea, right? They're supposed to wear the machine, or else they could die.
For sure,
But it's really uncomfortable and painful, and people don't like to do it, and oftentimes they don't. And I kind of think the same thing with this vest. Like, yes, he should have been wearing it, but those things are massive and heavy, and I can't imagine easy to take a nap in.
Yeah.
And also, we're human. We sometimes make mistakes, or
Of
we
course.
sometimes are stubborn.
You would probably think, when to wear that, maybe when I'm out doing stuff. I'm just going for a nap. How much problems could I get into? It's just, it's 36 years old, and it's no age whatsoever.
And also, I feel with something like that, it's important to remember, like, realistically, like, was he able to wear it in the shower? Is it actually realistic for him to wear it 24/7 and never take it off? I don't think it probably is. So I don't like to blame.
No, I don't put blame.
To
I
be
don't
like,
put blame.
oh, well,
No.
he should have worn the vest, and I'm going to blame him for. But that's not how I feel at all.
No, I don't have an ounce of blame whatsoever. It's just, for me, it's just that...
I know.
It's the, if you could travel back in time.
Yeah,
type
you just
of a
literally
thing.
want to do that quick save, like, go back.
Life and death never feels like if you just did this one thing.
Yeah.
Then it would be, and it's that's the part of it, and I don't place blame, because if I was him, I probably wouldn't have been wearing the fucking thing either, because that's, I can understand and empathize with that. I get it. In a strange sign of the times, you can watch the announcement to the wrestlers that Bray has passed. That video exists. You could watch his funeral. That exists as well, and it's both, like, I think equal parts for me. Like, I find that quite morbid, that every element of a wrestler's journey, even their death, is so strictly documented now. The upside, I think, of seeing the funeral is like the pure outpouring of love and all that. His phrase he always used to say was in his promos, which was that he was the color red in a world of black and white. So his funeral was all red themed, so everyone wore red, and it's something that feels like it's only yesterday, and I know it's been at least 2 and a bit years since then. And in the time that has passed since Bray's passing, we've had a lot of the vision that was brought forth from Rob Fye and from Jason Baker and from Bray himself. They had all these ideas that had been talked since literally the Firefly Funhouse started, that there would be, like, wrestlers would become, there'll be a Huskus the Pig, there will be, these real life versions of these wrestlers. And we have had, in the last year or so, the introduction of these characters back into wrestling. And I think just hearing me say that now, after talking about all these things, I'm like, don't like it, no, don't want to do that. But I will say, the videos that Bo did, the promos that he did explaining, his relationship to Bray, why they're doing this, what it meant to him, and waving that into kayfabe. Generally, I think the best promo I heard in all of 2024 was Eric Rowan's promo talking about...
Oh my god, that made me cry.
I'm like covered. We have a strict no slapping the goosebumps on our arms because we fucked up the audio in our last episode by doing
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. You don't know. You're not The Rock. But that for me was like, straight to the heart, one of the best promos I think I've ever heard. It is some real life stuff that they're dwelling on there. It is rich intellectual property. The name is being used, and those careers are all intertwined in one way or another with Bray's legacy. And I'm really happy that it's something that fans can enjoy and that it's part of Bray's legacy. And I think Bray Wyatt 100% fits into the category of one of those sick freaks in wrestling who'd be thrilled to bits to know that continues. I am sitting here now, though, having gotten the special Wyatt 6 pre-order DLC for 2K and the special footage on the Season 2 of The Island of Bray recording stuff that was from a previous game that wasn't used and played in a posthumous manner. And also I got a news alert on my phone literally yesterday about the special Wyatt 6 Haunted House experience that's coming to...
Orlando.
Or Universal Studios in Orlando, where you'll be chased by a facsimile of the Fiend and all. There is a point where I look at the merciless machine that is TKO and the money-making endeavors that they are in, and boy, they're good at that. Let me tell you what, Nick Khan, that man knows his brands, and they are making more money than ever. Tip of the cap and all that. And I know that Bray's vision and his creativity fits into that camp of marketable stuff kids want toys of, fans love it, fans who don't know who Bray is just love the cool spooky characters on screen, they're a fun act, fans who love Bray and miss him feel something through that. I just would hope, and I say this not saying that this has happened, I just hope that we'll have the care and respect to remember that that is a father, a father who's got some really fucking amazing kids. That's a brother, that's a fiance, a husband, a son, and he's important in so many people's lives. Just please handle it with the care and respect that it needs. Because I do feel in the gold rush sometimes, even with the best of intentions, that may not be the case. Yeah. And I felt just maybe, we're feeling a lot about Bray, you can tell right now, and maybe this was not everyone's experience, but just when I got that, I was, on my phone, I was literally reading up about a great thread someone put together on Reddit about trying to tie all of Bray's lore together, and I got bzz on my phone there going, oh, here's the press release about the Wyatt 6 Haunted House, and it just made me, it gave me a bit of pause, and if it's giving me pause, there are much bigger fans of Bray out there, and there are people who he meant a lot more to, then maybe it gave them a bit more pause. Just remember, he hasn't been gone that long, and that time will only be further. And the further it passes, the more normal it will seem, and it's feeling a little too normal right now. I felt a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, he's a difficult one to wrestle with, really, because he is such a unique case. I feel a lot of wrestlers would hate the idea of them being distilled to a gimmick that's not even to do with wrestling.
Yeah, because, Paul Bearer's ashes being used as a gimmick in CM Punk and The Undertaker's feud, that was excited as the example of like, oh, he would have loved it. His kids said that his dad would have been cool with it. That was used to promote a wrestling match, a wrestling angle on a wrestling show.
Yeah. A
lot of the Wyatt stuff currently, like there's a lot more Wyatt 6 merchandise and merchandising than there is.
Well, there's not much
matches.
of them on wrestling.
Yeah, they're the tag champs currently, and they're they're on the show, but they're more marketable stuff than they are an integral part of wrestling right now.
And luckily, I think Bray, of all the wrestlers who have existed, he probably cared most about the creative side of things more than the in-ring stuff anyway. Not to say that he didn't care about the in-ring stuff. He obviously did.
Damn good at it, Joe.
He was really, really, really good at it. And I hope we've gotten to cover enough of that. But it's just, he is so creative as well. It's hard to balance those two things as a fan. But I do think he's quite unique in that respect, in that I don't think he'd mind the fact that his legacy is less to do with his in-ring work and more to do with his IP, I guess.
His world. He's made a world within wrestling, and I think that much he would be very, very happy with.
He would be very happy with it. However, I worry that this sets a dangerous precedent for the countless wrestlers, of which there are many, many, many more who do care about their in-ring career, who, if they died suddenly, would get a similar treatment when they do not want that.
Bray is very much the exception, not the
Yes.
rule, I would think. You know, there are people like Bray out there for sure in wrestling, but I wouldn't say you could expect that to be the norm. Not in any sense.
No.
And yeah, I would hate, for lack of a better term, for it to get ghoulish.
Yes.
You know, I don't think that's the intent, you know. And obviously when you're dealing with kind of dark themes and twisted stuff and all that, it's just... Part of it is because when they debuted that Wyatt Six faction, there was so much heart in it.
Yes.
And I was like, hey, you know what? I was skeptical, but with these promos and this presentation, you really have made me feel like, okay, you've considered this. You're not doing it willy-nilly. But that doesn't give you a license to then later do it willy-nilly. You've set your own standard, and I would hold you up to that as a fan. And I think there's people who would expect a hell of a lot more than you and I personally would, Joe. You know, I think that's all we're saying on that end, you know?
Yes, exactly. I think what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for others.
But what a fascinating career and a fascinating individual, to put it mildly. We've had many, many, many messages across the various platforms, so let's get into some of your tweets and some of your posts about the legendary Bray Wyatt. Thanks everyone for messaging in. Don't forget you can always follow us and contribute to any upcoming episodes. We're on X, we're on Blue Sky at How To Wrestling. You can catch us on our Facebook page. And also as well now, you can do it on our Patreon page, patreon.com/How To Wrestling. You don't need to be a full-time backer. You can just be a free member and add in your 2 cents there. I know there's a lot of folks who aren't particularly keen about social media as it currently stands, and I don't blame you. So there's a nice space where you can give us your 2 cents about any upcoming episodes at patreon.com/How To Wrestling.
So first up from our Patreon, we've got one here from Will Hargrave who says, Bray is a wrestler who's impossible to separate from the bad booking they received. The Wyatt family are iconic, but the more he lost, the more nonsensical the cult leader character became. What started as a genuinely fascinating character ended with rambling promos and bug projections. And same again with The Fiend. The Firefly Funhouse segments were the lone highlight of late 2010s WWE, and The Fiend's debut against Finn Balor is one of my favourite squash matches ever. But once again, the character got chipped away at until he was losing to Randy Orton next to a box-like structure.
Don't forget the black goo.
So as talented as he was, there was always a feeling watching him that his talents weren't being properly utilised. Definitely had a lot more to give, and it's tragic he died so young. It's great seeing so many tributes for him, most recently at All In with Swerve's entrance.
I think it is something I've noticed with a lot of the characters, particularly in WWE, where it feels like creative people go to experience a multitude of hardships creatively. I think that a lot of the reason why so many people have held on to Bray is to see that kind of, maybe it didn't always work. I think people kind of relate to the frustration or the kind of the disappointments that he clearly experienced while he was there. And I think that makes some of the highlights or some of the moments where it did work, like the Firefly Funhouse or the match you mentioned there against Finn, which is a phenomenal, like almost perfect debut of an impossible to conceive character in wrestling. I think it makes those kind of pop even more, particularly in people's memories now. And certainly it feels like people haven't been holding on to the bad memories. I know it's tragic that he's passed, but it feels like that has maybe emphasized the parts that people do choose to remember and the parts that people do have fond memories for.
Yeah. Next up from Nancy Boy, I always felt as WWE never really seemed to feel comfortable putting him over, that he was miscast as a wrestler and his character would have had more longevity as a manager to people like Braun, Eric Rowan, etc. WWE has always struggled for managers as well.
Yeah, and I think as much as I love that idea, can you remember anyone who's been like kind of, they're a manager who very seldomly wrestles, and when they do, they're like a force of nature?
No, that's the thing, and it would be so cool to see that done, but it would also be kind of frustrating knowing he could wrestle really well.
Yes, because I think
being denied that, but then also that could work so well. You want it so much.
I think that there is still a case for that to be made, and I think that could be conceivably could happen, particularly in WWE, where I feel like, you know, I think you couldn't get away with that in maybe some of the other companies where the kind of expectation of wrestling is higher or whatever. But in WWE, I think the idea of someone being a manager who, when, you know, push comes to shove, they then wrestle. But what usually happens is someone gets cast as a manager, and then look at LA Knight, for instance. When he was brought up to the main roster, he was cast as a manager for the Maximum Male Models.
Really?
Yeah, and then they treated that as like, instead of it being like, and now he might wrestle on occasion, he could be, a legitimate wrestler. Immediately by being a manager, it's like, that's it, you're done. Like, remember when they said that Adam Cole was allegedly going to be a manager?
Oh, yeah.
And like, it's straight, like, even the rumor of that killed so much of that guy's momentum. So WWE's weirdo relationship with managers extends far and beyond, I guess, the confines of Bray Wyatt. But I can see it as being something exciting.
It could have worked really well.
Yeah.
Like, a pallbearer that could wrestle would be the greatest thing ever.
Now you're just talking about our 2K game now that we're playing
basically.
recently.
Now over on Twitter, this one from Steve Morris. I think he was so overrated. The booking didn't help with him losing the big ones, but once the bell rang, I just didn't give a damn. Original Bray was fine. Fiend's invincibility was ridiculously stupid and set the company back years. That being said, his untimely death was a tragedy, and his loss was devastating. He seemed like an incredibly friendly man who cared about everybody. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone who, maybe was frustrated with him as a character, who was like happy to see him then get kind of constantly, brought out in new guises, new iterations. I think most of us who were excited about like kind of Bray as the Fiend or Bray when he returned in 2022 were people who were originally fans of his all the way back in 2014. And I don't think if you weren't a fan of his from the word go, I don't think there was any kind of permutation or variation of him that you are going to like. But I think it was very safe to say that, like, even though there were scores of wrestling fans who the very nature of his character and what his vision was the complete polar opposite of what their vision of wrestling might be. I mean, I think case in point, look at the amount of people in AEW, when he passed, where the tributes were. And I think there could be competing visions of what wrestling should be or what creativity in wrestling should be, but there can still be respect for the man and the person. And I think that is probably his ultimate legacy, is that as a person in wrestling, as a mentor, as a guiding figure, as a colleague, whatever you want to call it, I think that stands head and shoulders above anything he did in a ring.
Absolutely. But I think even if you're looking purely at his characters and not at his real life legacy, I think it's just so easy to look at all the negatives there, like with the invincibility stuff and the stop-start booking and things like that. And it's so obviously a WWE decision. Like, it's just a symptom of the root cause, which is WWE is inconsistent. And that's something that we see all the time, not just for Bray. This is a problem they have as a company.
But I still, ultimately, as we were saying, about, when he got released from WWE, we were talking a bit earlier, it's the only place where his vision, his character could have consumer, even though it didn't work out necessarily most of the time. And I think there's a lot of folks who might erroneously think, this guy just wants to go out and make horror movies. He doesn't care about wrestling. I think one of the things that struck me the most when we were doing our research was what an absolute, like, super fan of not just WWE, but like all wrestling. The guy, first and foremost, was a wrestling super fan. That was what drove his passion.
That's it, because as much as I'm sure he loved watching horror movies, they aren't generally listed as his main influences.
Or his sole influences, I guess.
Yeah, except maybe when he's like a 3-year-old watching Ghostbusters. His main influences were books, and they were wrestling characters. Yeah. And that's what I think makes him so unique, is I think it would be easy enough to be heavily influenced by horror movies, come into wrestling and try and make wrestling a horror movie, and it wouldn't work. The reason why the bits worked that did work is because he wasn't trying to do anything that had been done before.
And all those people, who are maybe criticizing him or whatever it was, they all have memories of the fantastical characters of the 20 years that came prior. And I think Bray is probably the first example of a wrestler who was completely inspired by the kind of spooky stuff and whatnot that came in the late 80s and the mid 90s and whatnot. And I think Bray's influence, if you look in 10 years from when this episode is, there will be a multitude, a litany. I mean, there already is, it feels like, a litany of characters. Like, it feels like his character was very important to carry the torch from the kitschy era into what modern wrestling is. Mm-hmm. And there's no shortage of alternative goth, emo scene, etc. wrestling fans who are getting into wrestling and becoming wrestlers in part because of Bray and what he did.
Next from Darren Gutteridge. The highest compliment I can give the Bray Wyatt character is that it was so good it laid bare the limitations of wrestling as a storytelling medium.
Yeah, that's like a much nicer, more kind of, I think, kind way of putting the kind of well, we have to do a match then. What are you going to do? You got to ring the bell. I think if you look at any type of trying to push the boundary in any sort of culture, any sort of medium, there needs to be, think of all the video games that you and I, Joe, love, that as in themselves aren't great games, but they push the boundaries so that the next generation that came after it could take some of those ideas and actually, work quite well with it. I mean, a game you and I love is Moon, the anti-RPG, which I think if you put in the hands of any kind of, youngster or teenager, they'd be like, ugh, what's this? It doesn't work. It shouldn't work.
Yeah.
And yet, without that, you don't have Undertale or Deltarune or so many other kind of extremely popular games of that ilk who will point to that as being its main inspiration. So, fear of failure is the death of all creativity in wrestling. And I think I'm glad that he at least used the obscene resources at his disposal to try something at least.
Yeah, that's it. Next from Mick M90. The Fiend was my favourite thing in wrestling for a while. Mr. Rogers turning into a demon is such a cool idea. Bray was a creative genius who got the supernatural side of wrestling better than anyone else. He seemed like such a nice guy too, and he is very, very much missed. Yeah,
and his absurd volume of work that he did, because, it feels like so often when you're talking about, a wrestler like this, that it's like, like sand through the hourglass, they slipped away, and it's like, it is still... Even after all of this, I don't think I've still fully come to terms with the fact that he's not with us anymore. But the sheer volume of work that he managed to put out, the sheer variety of things that he tried to do during his, decade or thereabouts in WWE, it's absolutely incredible. And I don't think there's a volume of work from another wrestler that's not just talking about, in ring, making the moves better, making the sequences better. Just someone being like, here's a load of wild, crazy, weird shit and have at it. I can't begin to imagine the influence and how it's going to seep in and all that.
I know, it's so exciting, actually.
And it's in the way that it is that I don't think you're going to get many people... He's the type of guy that the people he's inspiring, I don't think you're going to see loads of people just trying to rip off The Fiend or try and rip off and be Bray Wyatt.
I don't think you can. And I think there have been, as we've seen from the tweets, but also, we talked about it a lot in the episode, the booking wasn't perfect. There were so many huge fundamental errors with a lot of the presentation of his ideas.
That can often be more inspirational to people.
But that's it. I think there's going to be a lot of people growing up now who are influenced by Bray, who saw firsthand what not to do.
Yes.
And that's just as important as knowing what to do.
The amount of times I remember when I was doing stand-up with Sam and Billy, and we would watch amazing stand-up, and then we all be like, wow, that was amazing. Gee, that's...
Shit.
Damn, I wish
Oh,
I was good. And then we'd see someone who was bad, or kind of, oh, that was a good idea, but it didn't work. And that's when we would be effervescent with it. Oh my God, what if they did this? And then all of a sudden you've got great ideas yourself. As horrible as it is to say, the imperfection of what he tried is probably the main thing that's going to inspire people, as opposed to he just did non-stop classics. Everything was a perfect cinematic masterpiece. For every Firefly Funhouse match with John Cena, there's a swamp fight with Braun Strowman. Dare I say, there's as many people who are inspired by the limitations of the swamp fight than they were by the excellence of the Firefly Funhouse match.
Yeah.
So I think, oftentimes we as fans don't necessarily understand the long-term ramifications of something being imperfect. His career is imperfect for sure, but I think that is in itself what makes him the perfect inspiration for leagues of wrestlers to come, And he certainly got a lot of people watching wrestling and a lot of young people interested in wrestling during a period where, genuinely in 2019, I didn't think there was going to be a WWE in 5 years' time.
It was unwatchable for the most part. And he was not only made it watchable, he made it exciting.
I just thinking, at that point when that came out, that the Firefly Funhouse and Fiend and all that, I was like, only in WWE could something this wildly creative and different and off the wall could happen against the backdrop of some of the most creatively derelict content they had ever made.
That's true.
But that's the magic of wrestling sometimes. You can never know on a show what will pop and what won't. And let me tell you, I've a newfound love for Bray after all this. It was a much tougher episode to research and to delve into with you than I thought it would be, Joe.
And I'm proud because I didn't cry as much as I thought I would.
No, but there was a few tears along the way from both of us.
The watching, oh my God, there was quite a bit.
And I will stop describing those moments now because I do in fact see that there might be some tears. But here, look, we'll do something now as a nice change of pace for our next episode. an ultimate change of pace. This is a team that Joe has had her eye on for a long time, who intrigue her to no end. Like when you see a weirdo in Animal Crossing, you're like, this guy's gotta come onto my island. Joe, I'll give you the honors. What's the next episode?
It's the Bushwhackers! Yay!
Yes! I think fresh from seeing Bret Hart doing the Bushwhackers walk at their Hall of Fame speech, now more than ever feels like a perfect time to delve into the duality of one of the most iconic, strange, oddball, and often written off tag teams in wrestling history. Because for all of us who may have memories of these toothless weirdos from New Zealand eating chickens with their bare hands, there are all these tales of them on the territories and around the world as the ultra-violent sheep herders, a team that brought deathmatch-style wrestling to an era that was still in cotton tights. And I can't wait, Joe, to get into the sweet and the sour as we watch two of the most cuddly, lovable men in the WWF and compare and contrast it with two savages from New Zealand biting their opponents and eating glass.
I'm really excited, and I'm hoping there'll be some kind of like origin story for why they turned from the violent sheep herders into the Bushwhackers. Like, what happened? What events happened in their lives that made them almost so neutered?
I mean, they are equal parts adorable, but you know,
They're
stuff.
so adorable.
I've heard about the sheep herders. I mean, I'm reading Brett's book, you know, for the Attitude Era podcast at the moment, and the stories about them in Japan as being these like absolute wild men who aren't invited back because they cause so much chaos.
Aww.
And that's during an era when like Bruiser Brody is there, etc. So very excited for you fans to perhaps, if you are aware of the sheep herders, to let us know of some of that origin story, some of that backstory, some of that other side. Or for your memories, good, bad, or indifferent, these are men that have to their name one of the lowest rated matches in the history of Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter.
Wow, I want to see that one.
We'll definitely be watching that. So we'll be watching, no doubt, some very interesting, some very comedic, and absolutely some awful wrestling along the way. But as we learned very often, Joe, some of the wrestling that was so harshly maligned from the early 90s has ended up being some of your favourite stuff.
Yeah, I love low-rated matches.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we might delve into the time they dressed up as Doink the Clown, which might be very, very scary. We might look into them licking Mean Gene Okerlund, and we might look into them eating with their mouths full and doing a promo at the same time. I'm excited for the trip down to New Zealand for How to Bushwhackers. Don't forget to use the hashtag. There'll be a post up on Facebook, on X, and on Blue Sky. And don't forget as well, you can let us know your 2 cents and get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive audio over at our Patreon page, patreon.com/HowToWrestling, where Joe and I have been reviewing all of the monthly pay-per-views from WWE and AEW all the way back to 2016. We just had our 2 nights of SummerSlam. We have our pay-per-view Classic series. We're reviewing all of Totally Divas. All this is available now for a $5 backing. We keep this show ad-free, 100% fan and listener supported. So if you like the show and you want to say thanks and treat yourself with a lot of good audio content and ongoing content at that, patreon.com/HowToWrestling. Our next pay-per-view Classic is going to be a special where Joe is picking her own playlist from the Wrestling Gold 5-disc DVD box set as commentated on by a young and friendly Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer. Folks, there's going to be a wrestling bear.
Oh, it's so good. I cannot wait to review this. There's a mud match.
Hell yeah.
There's a bear. There's loads of shit.
Yes, that and the entire series, including pay-per-view reviews from the likes of New Japan Pro Wrestling, TNA, WWE, from all eras, WCW, and so much more. Get access to it all now and support the show. Patreon.com/HowToWrestling. Well, folks, thank you once again for joining us on this very special episode. It was an emotional one, but a very revealing and rewarding one at the same time. Treat yourself. Go watch some weirdo Bray Wyatt content on YouTube right now, I say. But next time, a different episode for sure, Joe. I'm excited. I'm going to start doing the old special Bushwhackers dance now.
We're going to do it around the house constantly. I just know it.
It's good exercise.
It is actually really good exercise,
but,
yeah.
We won't be able to record while doing it because we might hit the microphone. But until next time, where we're going to be heading down to New Zealand, it's a goodbye from me, Kevin.
And a goodbye from me, Joe.
And we'll see you next time on How to Wrestling.
See ya.